Sideways, so I can get in closer. Then the table sideways. I mean, there's a thing around here. So that's going in. There we go. Fantastic. That's it, people. Wonderful. All right. Okay, so there we go. Okay, did I send? I forget. Did I send course notes to everybody? I never did. Oh, this is terrible. Well, I'll do it after this class. I'll send a PDF to Nicole, and she can put it on the. She can give it to you. You can download it. I forgot completely. I should have given you a PDF of teachings that cover everything we've talked about. You should have reminded me. I always do it. I forgot. Yes. Okay, I'll remember. I'll do that. So it'll have teachings about karma, about the mind, and everything we're talking about. I'll send you this so you can study it at your leisure. Unless you've got perfect memory, in which case you can transcribe everything you've heard. Some people have perfect memories. Hard to imagine, isn't it? Okay. Everybody. Hello, people. All right. What? Is it on? Yep, we're on. You can hear me on the Zoom? Yep. Good. Okay. All right. Okay. So we're here together to listen, think about, analyze, contemplate, and if we choose to, practice these views about the world coming from the Buddha through the experiences of the Tibetan Buddhists, who got it from the experience of the great Indians. As Dalai Lama always says, we are the Nalanda tradition, meaning the great yogis of the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th century of the great monastic university in India. Then in the 7th century, the holy beings, the knowledge holders, rigsin, that's a lovely word, knowledge holders, they don't need to ship texts to Tibet. They shipped people with the knowledge in their minds. That's what we really need, experiential knowledge. It's very powerful, isn't it? And then they carried on in Tibet, unbroken, which is very encouraging. And hopefully now the knowledge is being passed into our minds so we can retain it. So we can pass it on to others. So I think we can sing our little refuge prayer if you know it. If you know it, if you got your books there, you know it, or if you, I can just say the words and you can. I'll sing it in Tibetan once or twice. So the words are saying the first 2 lines are expressing our reliance on the Buddha. So if we are already feeling we are Buddhists, then we remind ourselves of that reliance. And then the second 2 lines are expressing this altruistic kind of view. We'll listen to this teaching so we can be of benefit to us. We can become finally an enlightened being so we can be of benefit to others. Thinking like that. Huh?
What page are you on? Yeah.
I don't know. Refuge prayer before teachings. Refuge prayer before teachings.
98. Yes, thank you, Jack. 98.
Okay.
Thank you.
Before teachings, it says that?
Yes, yes. This is
Okay, just the
one-
refuge prayer?
Yes,
It says that.
before teaching.
Okay, good. Okay, now we sing in Tibetan. Sangye charang soke chognam la jangchu badu dagni kyab suchi. Dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki rola penche sangye drupa shog sangye chadang soke chognam la jangchu badu dagni kyab suchi. Dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki rola penche sangye drupa shog sangye chadang soke chognam la jangchu badu dagni kyab suchi. Dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sange drupa sho. Okay, so far this week we've talked first on Thursday about the mind, a bit about the mind, the way it works, and how to look into the mind and the Buddhist approach to what's in the mind, and using that as your basis for becoming your own therapist, as Nami she likes to put it. We touched on that. And then yesterday we looked into this natural law for the Buddha, or the law of karma that runs the universe, or the law within which our lives run, put it like that. And I really made the emphasis there about how it's not revelation coming from a creator, which is what we think of as religion, which is fine if you believe in a creator, but this is not the Buddha's view. It's quite different. The knowledge here is coming from experience of people, not from on high. quite a different point. So we discussed a little bit karma, how it works. We also need to talk about vows and how to purify karma. And mind is one topic and karma is another, but they're of course completely integrated because karma plays out in minds, you know. So today I think it says that about the 6 perfections, but I'm wondering if I'll touch upon it. But I think we'll go back to our previous topics, so we haven't sort of finished. So, you know, this first 2 parts we've talked about. This is sort of, there's this analogy I repeat all the time. A bird needs 2 wings, wisdom and compassion. So wisdom sounds a bit abstract, you know, you're not sure what you mean by wisdom, you know. But really what that is all about for the Buddhist view is what we've talked about so far. Because literally Buddha's saying we're living in la-la land. We have all these misconceptions about happiness, suffering, what causes it. He's not being fundamentalist, he's just telling us what he's found to be true. So he's telling us that what goes on in our mind, and therefore what we do on the basis of that with our body and speech, that is the process that these are the main players, body, speech, and mind. These are the main players in the developing of our happiness and our suffering, which is a shock because we think it's the outside world, very clear. And then as far as karma is concerned, they just reiterated it there. So the mind is the main point for the Buddha, knowing how it works, because that's where the suffering and happiness start. That's a fundamentally different view. So that's what the wisdom is about, what you get already from that is more content, more fulfilled. So because Buddha says, because we're suffering, because of delusion, because of attachment, anger, depression, anxiety, a low self-esteem, all based on this very powerful, concrete sense of a separate me, this is why we suffer. So working on that, abiding by the laws of karma, stopping harming others, you know, controlling our body, controlling our speech, controlling the servants of our mind, and then beginning to work on the mind. This is the process to bring our own happiness, quite literally, our own fulfillment, our own contentment. But also what comes along with that is more clarity, more in touch with others, more seeing how things are. And that's the simple meaning of wisdom. In other words, being locked into the misery and unhappiness. 1, we're miserable, but 2, we're living in la-la land. Because we see the entire world through the lenses of our own neuroses. As Lama Zopa says, the world appears back to us in the aspect of whatever is in our mind. That's pretty intense. So as we lessen the neuroses and grow the goodness and the virtues, that brings our contentment, but also our connectedness to others, but also more clarity, therefore. It removes all the barriers between self and other. So literally wisdom, being more in touch with how things are. So that's the work you do to help yourself. It's all about you. We misunderstand that in the West. We don't really focus on that. That's really the self-compassion wing. Then what it qualifies you to do is open your eyes and go, oh my God, we're all in the same boat. Look at the world. Everyone's caught up in misery. Everyone's not abiding by the laws of karma. Everybody thinks someone else is the cause of their suffering. Everybody else is miserable, angry, depressed, and jealous. Wow, look at that. Now you can start to want to help others. But you've got to help yourself first. So clear. If you don't want to, I mean, like anything, if you want to help people with nutrition, when you see how sick and unhealthy they all are, you can't rush out and start telling what to do if you haven't studied nutrition. It's like a joke. You got to do the wisdom wing first, isn't it? Put yourself together by learning about nutrition. Then you can help others. It's so obvious. We don't think that in ordinary terms, like helping the world. We think we rush out and go and volunteer here and there, and then wonder why we get exhausted and angry and upset and depressed, because we haven't done the work on ourselves first. This is crucial. So, okay, so we've done a bit of the wisdom wing here. Now let's go up to the compassion wing. This so-called 6 perfections is just a way of framing and describing the various practices as you progress along the path. And in particular, once you've cultivated lots of love and compassion on top of the wisdom wing, and then culminating in this bodhicitta, this kind of paradigm shift in the mind, where you finally start to have this powerful aspiration that only wants to benefit others. I mean, that's too abstract, too weird for us, unless we understand first the wisdom wing and then love and compassion. So before we even get to the 6 perfections, let's look at how we cultivate compassion. First lot's not compassion for ourselves. It's a way of putting it. They don't call it that. That's our term. You put yourself together first. You see your own suffering and why you are suffering and begin to fix it, which qualifies you just the other people suffer, and how to fix them, how to help them help themselves. So the very first step, there's a series in the combination of what's called bodhicitta, this Sanskrit word, which really means, like I said, this shift in the mind where only others are your focus, which is pretty intense view. And in our world, it sounds like mental illness, you no longer a thought of yourself. It sounds too weird, but this is absolutely what's possible. The compassion wing. So there's, there are different techniques that have been cultivated over the centuries for cultivating this extraordinary state of mind called bodhicitta, based upon extraordinary levels of love and compassion and the other virtuous states of mind. So there's a particular approach got 11 little points, like 11 little steps, little bullet points, steps. And the very first of these is what's called developing equanimity. So it's a very general English word. We can all conjure up what we think it means. Well, in Buddhist terms, first of all, in the wisdom wing, when you're doing the work on yourself, this inner work of lessening your delusions, lessening your crazy behavior, developing your own self, growing, lessening delusions and growing your contentment and your clarity. What you also get is more equanimity. This is one definition within yourself, more stable. Right now, when we're following attachment and anger and jealousy and pride, we're up and down like yo-yos every day, all over the place, like a mess. But as we develop more clarity and more practice and therefore more wisdom and more contentment, which is the consequence of this first stage of practice, your happiness, quite literally, you become more stable, less up and down like a yo-yo, So here in the compassion wing, the term equanimity is defined differently. It's another meaning altogether. This equanimity is a particular approach to other sentient beings. So what equanimity is, when you've accomplished it, is this heartfelt recognition that all the people we call friends, who are the objects of our attachment, all the people we might label enemies, who are the object of our aversion. We mightn't use the term enemy, but it's a label, it's a good label. A lot of people we don't like, people who've harmed us, hurt us, or we just don't like. And then all the people, which is 99.99% of the universe, who we can label strangers, who are the object of kind of our indifference, uncaring. This is the universe. Everybody has these three poisons, which when we look at in the wisdom wing is all about, how we're trying to really look into those states of mind and recognize how they cause us so much suffering. But here we're seeing them all also in relation to sentient beings. So you divide the entire world of all beings into these three categories. There's no fourth category. There are those you're attached to, whom you do have love and compassion for. And they're the only ones. Then you have the ones who have harmed you, the ex-husband, the mean boss, whatever, or even those ones you don't like the ugly politicians, whatever. They're in the label, the objects of your aversion or even your anger. We can label them enemies. And we do not want them to be happy. We do not have compassion or love for them, absolutely. Generally speaking, this is the world, isn't it? And the third lot, which is 99.99% of the entire universe, strangers, and how do we feel about them? Couldn't care less. As we say in England and Australia, you say could care less. We say couldn't care less. Very curious, isn't it? I can't work out the could care less, Couldn't care less. I could not care less. Surely I could care less. I never get that one. Can you explain it to me? Could care less? How's that logical?
It's not.
What? It's not, is it? Couldn't care less is more logical, isn't it? Anyway, never mind. Could care less. We hear it. We get the point. And this is 99% of the universe. I mean, we should be very shocked, actually, at how self-centered we are. We don't question because the world is like this. It's just not. We say, oh, that's normal. We'd say, won't we? So what we're trying to do here on the compassion wing is go beyond these three and learn to have love and compassion. Excuse me, but for all of them. I mean, just saying it sounds exhausting, isn't it? So this is what's vital. This is why the wisdom has to come first. if we're thinking about here, trying to have love and compassion and the other virtues in relation to all sentient beings, which means we've got to look and see how attachment and aversion and jealousy and low self-esteem prevent it. If we haven't done that work in the wisdom wing first, we can't possibly begin to do this one. If we can't distinguish between attachment and love, for example, which is a stupendously difficult job, it's not possible to grow your love unless an attachment. It's like they're all mixed together, like milk and water. If you can't distinguish one from the other, how can you change it? How can you identify? So this is why it's a crucial job in the wisdom wing to really have this self-awareness and knowing the character of attachment, knowing the character of love and distinguishing between them, for example. It's a huge topic. So here we're trying to cultivate love, which is defined as the thought, may you be happy. That's love. That's the Buddhist view of love. May you be happy. A delight in someone else's happiness. And then compassion, may you not suffer. So love is what you have if you see someone who's happy, you delight in their happiness, or you want them to be happy. And compassion is you see them suffering and you go, oh my God, look at that suffering. That's terrible. I wish you didn't suffer. That's compassion. That's love. It's very clear. Empathy and compassion in Buddhism are virtually synonymous. I know in the West we make a distinction, but these terms are used synonymously. So we're trying to, in the compassion wing, in the wisdom wing, you're trying to really calm down the neuroses. Here, we're still trying to calm down the neuroses, but we're adding to that. We're trying to grow the virtues. The wisdom wing is pulling out the weeds. Here, we're trying to also grow the flowers. It's the way of putting it. You understand? It's a distinctly different job. I mean, in the wisdom wing, if you're so overwhelmed by weeds in your garden, you've got no time to think about growing flowers. There's no space. You've got to make space by calming down all the crazy weeds. It's a really good way to put the first stages of practice. Do you understand? Knowing yourself, controlling the body, controlling the speech, controlling your mind, disciplining, and coming from understanding, not just squashing yourself. It's very powerful. And that brings your own contentment. You calm down, you become more fulfilled, more content, more self-confident. That's the consequence of the work on yourself. That's what I call it self-compassion. In other words, self-compassion isn't just having kind of a rest and a massage and things. That's wonderful. It's knowing your mind. It's quite hard work and understanding it and taking responsibility because it makes you suffer. So, okay, so here, then the whole point in the compassion wing, this series of 11 little technique steps culminates in this cultivation of this bodhicitta. So it's powerful levels of love and compassion that culminate in this. And this is these are extraordinary levels of mind. We're talking about becoming a saint, basically. This is really the only equivalent. Bodhisattvas are like what the world calls saints. So this equanimity is a starting point. It's a very logical starting point. Because right now, we do have love and we have compassion, but only for that first group. It's pretty evident, isn't it? We want our beloveds, our baby, our poodle, our family, the ones we tend to be close to. And indeed, they can also be in the enemy category. We know that. But the ones we're close to, our beloveds, they're the ones we spend all our time loving and having compassion for, aren't they? And we know it's our job to love and have compassion for our child. You don't look around hoping someone else will do it. I mean, you might. We know it's our job to love and have compassion for them. We know when we're with that hubby, our job is to love and have compassion. And then when he leaves us for someone else, we think, well, our job's over. Now we can hate him, What do you mean love him and have compassion for him? What are you talking about? He doesn't belong to me anymore. But we can see it's very self-centered. And then the strangers, that seems more exhausting. All the countless billions of people out there whose names you don't know, whose countries you don't even know where they are. We read all about them, but they're way over there somewhere, We understand this. So the idea that we're trying to cultivate love and compassion literally for every one of them is pretty intense, actually, isn't it? Pretty intense. So the other point that's vital, if we are trying to cultivate compassion for all these beings, compassion is when you see someone suffering, that means you have to define suffering. You have to know what you're talking about. So for us in the world now, the only suffering we recognize is from the Buddhist perspective of 3 levels of suffering in the First Noble Truth. We only recognize the first one. So the Buddha in the Four Noble Truths, like I said yesterday, that's his very first teaching. He lays his case, There is suffering and there are 3 levels. There are causes. You can get rid of it, both of them, suffering and causes, and the method. Pretty straightforward. So what is suffering then? Well, the first kind is the one that's obvious when the bad things happen. That is what we all agree on, you know, very clear. We know, we recognize that kind of suffering. When you hurt your knee, when your hubby leaves you, or the worst and most shocking levels of it, and we see it on this planet. Unbelievable levels of terrible, tortured suffering of the first kind. Clear. That's the only one. That's the only level of, that's where we have compassion. We don't even recognize the next level of what Buddha refers to as suffering. Why? And this sounds pretty shocking. Is because we call that happiness. And this is where it initially sounds very depressing. So what we call happiness, Buddha says, sorry guys, is actually a subtler, more pervasive level of suffering. We go, we're not even allowed to have happiness. We've got to give up our heart. We're not allowed to even enjoy cake. We get completely depressed, you know, but we have to understand it. And it's quite subtle. It's from a bigger, much bigger perspective. It's from this bigger picture of the Buddha, like his big world view, which incorporates all the different realms of existence. It's a much vaster view. And it's very hard to see this. This is back to the wisdom again. I can't help it. We have to go there. So what is the second kind of suffering? Not to mention the third, even more abstract. The second kind is called the suffering of change, which doesn't mean simply that things change, but that happy feelings don't last and then change into unhappy feelings. That's what it means. So we know it's true, but we don't join the dots. We don't pay attention. And a very simple example to prove the Buddha's point is, for example, an object of the senses, let's say the chocolate cake. A simple example of an object of one's attachment. So attachment, like we talked a bit on Thursday, is for the Buddha, effectively in the Four Noble Truths, it is the main source of all suffering, which is initially absurd because it's not our definition, it's not our analysis. And when you study the Buddha's teachings, if you choose to, you learn to and understand his view, you know. So attachment is primordially deep, pervasive, subtle, constant, neurotic state of mind, delusion at the level of assumption. It's multifaceted. The primordial level of it is dissatisfaction. You wake up in this life not satisfied. We say, oh, she's never happy, you know, never satisfied. Whatever we get, it's not enough. And when we really have it seriously, like in our culture, it's I am not enough. So that turns into self-loathing. We all recognize that. This is the consequence of practicing attachment in a past life, that you grow this constant dissatisfaction. So you wake up in this life with this dissatisfaction, a sense of not being enough, a sense of not having enough. So naturally, if you don't have enough, this leads to the next aspect of attachment, which is that I must find something that'll fill me up. It'll fill up the gaping hole, isn't it? And that's the evident level of attachment for the objects of the five senses. In fact, that's how we spend our lives, very simply. So as the man said on Thursday, is he here today? Who was it? You, wasn't it?
Attachment.
Yeah, you know, so well, if that means I'm not allowed to enjoy myself, isn't it? It sounds like that, doesn't it? It sounds, but it's way more nuanced than that. So we've got to give it a bit of space to try and understand it, you know? Because the point is, this is what's in, I'll leap to the end result, but Buddha, they don't present it like this in the teachings, but this is the point. What Buddha's in a sense saying, this is his presentation of what suffering is, and that is his presentation of his methodology to give up suffering. So if you're going to give up suffering, what's the opposite? What are you left with? Well, guess what? It's called happiness. So really what Buddha's giving us is his method of how to get happy. So then we've got to know what happiness is, and we've got to know what suffering is, if that's so. So that's why we have to really look at his analysis, because it's quite different and more nuanced than ours. You know, you'd have to say that. So initially when we hear, as Lama Zopa says, when you hear, you've got to give up attachment. Because we conflate attachment with compassion, with love, with all the good things. It's just not the way we analyze like he does. Then we go, oh, you mean I've got to give up my heart? I've got to give up my happiness? We get depressed. Because it sounds like he's being fundamentalist. You're not even allowed to enjoy chocolate cake. but it is not saying that. We've just got to be kind of patient in hearing it to get to see what it's saying. You mightn't agree with it. You don't have to. So, okay. So there you are with this emotion. Okay. I would say one way of describing attachment is like at a heart level, it's emotional hunger. It's a really good way to put it. That's why it's the feeling of missing something. Is you're hungry, isn't it? I don't have enough. And we mean emotion. We don't always mean the cake. It's a feeling of not having enough. This distress of, not having enough, not being enough. It's very deep in us. We all have it to some degree or another. So the most obvious way to alleviate it is to, to put the senses, and food is a big one for us, isn't it? I mean, we have a body. It's huge. The attachment to the body is enormous. Remember, Lama Yeshe would always laugh and say, you Westerners are ridiculous. You can't work out whether you're more attached to the food or the body. You understand? We can see it in our culture, enormous, the emphasis on anorexia and bulimia or so-called eating disorders. We're completely obsessed with our bodies. Everybody is attached to their body. Everybody is never satisfied with their body. That's what's fascinating. Your eyelashes are the right size and your nose goes this way. When I was fixing my new glasses, I looked in the mirror and I suddenly realized these eyebrows, I just didn't realize I never noticed. This eyebrow starts like 2 millimeters over from that one. It's like the wrong, it's just over my eyebrow. I thought, what's that? Do you understand? I mean, we are all like that. We don't want to admit it, but we all know we're like that because we're obsessed with our body. It means we're attached to our body, which means we're dissatisfied with it. That's the tragedy. You think if you're attached to it, you think you're beautiful. Why aren't I beautiful? No, we're not happy with it. We want it to be different. Better nose, better this, better left, left nerve in the right-hand side of the big toe. I mean, look at us. Not being mean. So, of course, food plays a major role because it feeds the body. Of course, we have obsessed with food. Anorexia, you name it. All, again, always like I joke, we put Greek words on our diseases, isn't it? It's hilarious. Anorexic, bulimia, psychopathic, schizophrenic. Very funny, I think. I don't know why we do that. Never mind. Okay, so we get this. So we're dissatisfied. So there's your habit is to like cake. It could be like, if you're Australian, it could be Vegemite. Australians love their Vegemite. Have you ever heard of Vegemite? Hilarious. Okay, so some funny black salty spread. It's so weird when you first taste it if you're not used to it. Australians we love our Vegemite. Anyway, whatever it is. So then you're dissatisfied. You feel, oh, what's missing? I'll have some cake. You get all excited. So the next level of attachment starts, which is now the anticipation, which is the excitement. So you anticipate and you go get it. You don't just sit there and hope it comes on your plate. You've got to go get it. And so the anticipation is building up, isn't it? So this is where again a key function of attachment is this whole, it comes from not having enough. It comes from the emotional hunger. But what we do on the basis of that, the more we emotionally hungry for something, the more we exaggerate its deliciousness and its role in making me happy. We put all our eggs in that basket. So this total anticipation, total expectation. You're going to get happy when you get the cake. We don't articulate it as simply as that, but that's the feeling that's there, isn't it? All unspoken from eons of habit, Buddha says. So you build up this massive story, excited, anticipating, and that's just the cake. I mean, look at us in relationships, especially the kind of boyfriend-girlfriend type ones. There's intensity of that attachment, the intensity of that energy, anticipation, building up, expectation. So then this is how now it's a suffering of change. It's logical, we know it. So you always building up anticipation, and you get the object, the cake goes in the mouth and meets the tongue consciousness. Or the sensory, the tongue, it meets the tongue, which is what we're waiting for. Waiting for the pleasure to come, the feeling, the happy feeling, the pleasure. And the fact is, it does come. But look at this. Look at this. The pleasure comes, but at that same time, the attachment in us, which has been building up, excited, the second of the first taste and the first moment of pleasure, attachment is still not satisfied. Oh, are we communicating? Yes. That's why you want the second mouthful. Already you're disappointed. Are we communicating? If we really could see this, it would break our hearts. So you think, well, the next mouthful will do it. And then you think the next piece will do it. And you're all perky and excited, desperately waiting for the happiness to come. And it is coming, but you miss it. Because you're not satisfied. It's not enough. So then what happens? You eat the fourth piece, and now what's happened to the suffering, the pleasant feeling? It's gradually, sneakily gone down and now turned into disgust. Because if you eat another mouthful, you vomit. So now it's a distinctly unpleasant feeling. I think we all know that. This is scientific analysis. This is not being sarcastic or mean. But it's so habitual. And it's obvious in the most gross level. I remember, reading about one girl on Tinder. I always joke about Tinder. I mean, I used to have to work hard picking up boys on the street. In Tinder, you press a button, it's so easy. I couldn't believe it. Anyway, this girl, she was with this boy and they just had sex. And she said she was getting dressed and it was quite disappointing. She looks over and there he is on Tinder getting the next girl. Or one boy who went to Sex Anonymous or whatever, and he, had to have his 20 girls a day. Whatever, I'm just talking. Human beings, right? Suffering, attachment, never satisfied. As he's having sex with one girl, he's already anticipating the next one. So that's the point. My coffee in the morning, right? My coffee in the morning is my favorite. I only have one, my morning one. Margaret's been making me my coffee with this nice light roast. And I have 6 teaspoons of coffee. Quite strong, with my half and half. And as I'm doing my practice in the morning, I'm anticipating it, aren't I? And so, of course, it's 24 hours since I've had a coffee. So it's really waiting for it to be delicious. And I can see it, watching your mind. You're excited, you're anticipating. Anticipating is the most exciting part, I think, of attachment. Look when you're ready to go out for the first time with a boyfriend. It's like utter joy, the anticipating. It's like incredible, isn't it? That's why it's devastating if he doesn't turn up. He says, sorry, I'm not coming. You've got a long way to crash down, isn't it? Or the cake is disgusting, or they don't have chocolate cake. Do you understand? We all recognize this. So you have my coffee, and it's the first mouthful, the most delicious. This is why there's so many things going on in the mind all at once. And the Buddha's analysis is incredibly precise because there's names for all the different states of mind. So there's one that's intention. I will have the coffee. Another is you pay attention. Then the attachments there, anticipating and getting excited and kind of pushing. Then there's the logic you've got to use to make the coffee nice. I've got to use intelligence. I've got to use discrimination to put the right spoons in, the right amount of water. And all that's happening while attachment's getting excited, all next to it, And then the pleasure comes, which is a very distinct state of mind, the pleasant feeling, which is all we want is a pleasant feeling. So the pleasant feeling is triggered. There's guaranteed. It does trigger pleasure. And why Buddha calls it suffering of change is because it doesn't last, because it's driven by attachment. And also because we believe that the pleasant feeling, this is really the key point the Buddha is making. We believe that pleasant feelings, which is what we mean by happiness, it's actually not, we think we're so addicted to believing the cake is the cause, and we're so addicted to even believing the cake is the happiness, that when you ask, I'll be smiling. Tell me about your happiness, Robina. I'll describe the cake, not my happiness, because we believe, we obsess with the object. If you're angry, you've got anger, but all you do is describe the boyfriend, because we're so obsessed with the object being the cause of the suffering and the cause of the happiness. And we even think that is the happiness, that is the suffering. So we don't even pay attention to our mind. So all these things going on in our mind, pleasant feeling is triggered. Buddha doesn't argue with that. It is pleasure. And some pleasure upon contact with certain objects, like your new boyfriend, the best pleasure on the planet. You can't believe the joy. It's not wrong. It is joy. But the way Buddha talks about it, not trying to be fundamentalist, is that because it's so driven by attachment, and essentially attachment is like junkie mind. It's like a junkie. It's the junkie part of us. And we all can see that. When a person's a junkie, the way we use that for extreme drug or alcohol or whatever, you can see what's called pleasure is like a joke to call. It's just now mere sustaining your sanity, So attachment pollutes the happiness, makes a mess of the happiness, isn't satisfied with the happiness, is like a junkie wants more, because we've missed that moment and you're still not satisfied. That's a tragedy. That's the default habit of attachment. Never satisfied. It's a bottomless pit. I think we recognize. So you keep having the cake in the hoping every second that maybe the next piece just might do it. And before you know it, you want to vomit. And it's now turned from pleasant feelings into unpleasant feelings. Now you've got to stop eating the cake. So in other words, then tomorrow you forget all about the acid reflux. You forget all about the stuffed stomach. You forget all about the, wanting to vomit. You forget all of that, which is caused by the same cake that caused the moment of pleasure in the beginning, and you're hoping for the pleasure again. You forget all about the misery and think, oh, good, the cake will do it again tomorrow. And we've been hitting our heads against brick walls, Buddha says, for eons, trying to get happy by following attachment. Are we communicating?
Yes.
So then you say, well, mate, what's your method? Understand? He doesn't tell us straight away. He just tries to make us feel disgusted by our method. But he should kind of try and tell us the method in advance. We get excited, but they spread the teaching, put the teachings out very gently. So essentially what Buddha's saying is that he's found a method to stop suffering and to get happiness. And he's talking about all levels of suffering. And what he's basically saying is, sorry, people, you think, and he was just the same as us, that happy feelings, which are completely valid, happy feelings, we'll go into that, what they are. Happy feelings, we utterly believe, totally believe that happy feelings are what we get when we get what attachment wants. In other words, we don't have any way of having happy feelings without getting something. Think about it. You wake up in the morning and you want to have happy feelings. But because we're so dominated by our body, it's not possible. Just the body itself is overwhelming. Sometimes, we can have just happy feelings out of the blue. Wow, how amazing. Doesn't last long. They seem quite random to us. So because we're so in these bodies and we have a world of objects and things, we're not talking subtle levels of attachment yet, then naturally we assume, because it's true, when you get the cake, you do get a happy feeling. So we logically deduce happiness is caused by the cake. So we can't imagine having happiness without the cake. We can't imagine having it without the music, the boyfriend, and all the other objects of the senses. It seems demented to think you can sit there with no sense objects and get happy. We just go mad. We're all junkies. We're in this body of a junkie. It's a body of a junkie, basically. So what Buddha's saying is he has found methods to get happy and to have pleasant feelings that aren't dependent upon objects of attachment. So basically he's saying you think happy feelings are what you get from getting what attachment wants. But he says, guess what? I have discovered that happy feelings are what you will get that will stay, that won't disappear when you give up attachment. That's what he's saying. That's very simple. Are we communicating? Then this is why it's so nice, especially in the tantric teachings and the teachings about Dzogchen and Mahamudra and blah, blah, blah. It's marvelous to hear these discussions about how, I mentioned it yesterday, the pure nature of our mind. This is something that we do not talk about. You don't talk like that in neuroscience. You don't discuss how your brain is pure in its nature. It's a demented concept. So we don't have a view like that in our psychology. I'm not being rude, it's a fact. We don't have a view like that. But this is the view of mind, not of a soul or spirit. He doesn't use that word. He's talking about your mind or your consciousness. When it's finally unencumbered, purified of all delusions, which is the job, you will be then tasting the natural state of your own blissful mind. Literally, joy, happiness, bliss, ecstasy, rapture, whatever level you want to discuss, is the natural state of a mind that's finished with delusions. Are we hearing me? It's very practical. It's a really powerful psychological presentation. It's extraordinary. Okay, don't hold your breath. It's going to take a while. But it's a method. It's all intact. Been there for a couple of thousand years. People practice it every day. There are plenty of exponents of it. Plenty of proof of the pudding. So it should encourage us. But it's just hard. Because we mix up these words, happiness, attachment, cake, with a kind of all big glom of experience. We'd have a very different analysis. Buddhism is so precise. Are we communicating? So then so what we do is we get all guilty. Oh, I shouldn't. Because even now, without even knowing about this, we always have guilt when we have happiness. It's almost like happiness is a sin, you know. I'm not being rude, but in the Christian teachings, the joy that you get from having sexual union with a person has to be made a sacrament from God. You're not allowed to have it unless God says. I'm not being rude. Are we communicating here? Because I want to feel guilty. Okay, so back to our community. So what we're trying to do is develop love and compassion for all beings and who have all levels of suffering. So already this immediately means you're going to have compassion for the poor people, the terrorized, the murdered, the raped, the harmed, but you're also suddenly going to have compassion for all the rich, happy people who have got the suffering of change. Do you understand? Because basically the first lot of people are those whose attachment isn't getting what it wants. And then the second lot of people are those who are getting what attachment wants, but it's just in a different phase. Soon will come the suffering of suffering, because the cake will run out. The husband will leave you. You'll get old. And the pleasant feelings go and turn into unpleasant feelings. It's not being cynical. It's not being mean. It's an analysis, I think, that we can prove if we use it to observe the world. But because it's natural and because we don't know any other method, we just say, well, that's just the way the world is. What do you expect, you know? The Buddha's giving his analysis of how we can change and go beyond it. And be happy all the time. I mean, you don't have to wait. So that's what they mean finally by nirvana. Nirvana is this term that I think means cessation of suffering, which means the person who's done this work we're talking about all the way to the point where they've uprooted the root delusion, which is what's known as realizing emptiness. That's a whole other discussion. They've now achieved, when they perfected that, they've achieved their own liberation or cessation of suffering and its causes. That's the goal of the wisdom week. Then you're done. You're cooked. You're out of here. You don't need to come back. You're finished. You're in bliss. Your mind is just in pure state of joy. It just sounds too weird for us, you know. So we've got the compassion wing as well. Because then you realize everyone's in the same boat and you can't bear not to come back again and again to help others out of your compassion. You know? So this compassion then will be including compassion for those who are, you know, because we're all driven by attachment. Whether you're getting what attachment wants or not, we're all driven by attachment. This is the suffering of the universe, Buddha says. That's his analysis.
No.
What happened? Someone says something? You have a question? Who has a question? Any questions? No. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Okay.
Are you
Go.
happy all the time?
What?
Are you happy all the time?
No, I've got way more to go. I'm nowhere near fully developed. But I mean, this is where we don't have to, what I was about to get at when I talked about nirvana, you don't have to wait till then to prove this to be true. We can I think we can see logically in our own minds. We can see, I think we can prove it to be true. If one day you're more dominated by depression or anxiety, not to mention anger, it's clear you're miserable. And if another day you wake up and you're not so attached, not so angry, you might even be feeling quite pleasant and you might be feeling a bit loving. It's clearly more pleasing. So we can prove it to be true. So you just extend that to a profound degree, that's all. So the gradual, even this is why the wisdom wing already is, you know, lessening, you control your body, you control the servants of your mind. You stop killing and stealing and bad-mouthing and jumping on the wrong partner, and then you can start to extrapolate from that. Oh, well, I better stop shoving 17 pieces of cake in my mouth. It won't bring me happiness. So you start to harness your behavior, which then allows you to start to really work on your mind. This is the method, initially quite painful, but that's the method literally for getting your own bliss. You complete that job by realizing emptiness. Don't even worry about compassion wing. But what I'm getting at is that even as you start to do that, you become more content, and naturally you become more compassionate without even practicing compassion. As you lessen your own neuroses, as you become less self-centered, less neurotic, you become more content and automatically more connected to others. That we can prove, you know. So I have to wait till we get nirvana to prove it. It's evident. Are you with me? Yeah. But we are sort of, because we have this guilt thing, oh, it can't be just so I can get happy, you know. No, of course, you can have the bigger picture of wanting to help others, and you've got to have that. You've got to have that. But don't apologize. Be delighted. Want to be more happy. You've got to want to be more happy in order to give up the suffering, So be very humble about it. Of course, and knowing that your mind has this potential to be joyful, wow, please welcome it. We get guilty. Oh, that sounds self-centered. Oh, I can't be like that. Or many people in the world, it's very interesting. I mean, many people are very compassionate who really try to help the world. Even the person I know, she says very clearly, I will not ever be happy. How can I be happy when other people are suffering? Which is such a terrible mistake. I mean, if I look at someone like the Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa, a person we know, many of us know, he was so absurdly happy, you couldn't believe it, especially when bad things happened. I mean, interviewing Venerable Roger, so I got to write the obituary, I told you that. When Roger had his stroke, you know. I mean, when you have a stroke, you get quite traumatized, and your family are freaking out, and you're freaking out, and you're in tears, and you know you're going to get better again, and you're devastated. Roger said he never, ever asked any of the doctors anything about his illness. He ignored what they told him, and he was even more joyful and even more compassionate. I mean, it's hard to imagine that, but when you know these stages of the path, you can imagine how it's possible to be that way. So the interesting point is, as you get more developed in your own practice, you become more joyful. And as you get more compassion, this is what's so ironic for us. We can't get this. You become more happy. And therefore you have more compassion. And therefore you have more courage and more enthusiasm to never give up helping others. Whereas we think, you know, the commonest thing for us is we see the world suffering. We go crazy. We get depressed. We get angry. We even kill ourselves because we can't bear the pain. So we think that we suffer because of other people's suffering. No, we suffer because we have attachment which can't stand problems. Therefore, we have aversion, which either becomes anger or depression. So, of course, you kill someone else, you kill yourself. We don't suffer because of suffering. We suffer because of attachment and aversion. That's a powerful point to see, I tell you people. So equanimity, back to equanimity. How do we get it? Okay. With all these different jumps, even as I'm talking, imagine right in front of you a person eyeball to eyeball whom you can put in the enemy category for today. It could be even just your hubby for today, or could be your ex-hubby, for example, or could be a politician you hate. Anyone, put them there whom you have aversion for. Right? We all have that. We often say, "Oh, I don't dislike anybody." I'm sorry, it's just not true. You know, excuse me. Check again. Then to the left, put your beloved. If you have any beloveds today at all, maybe you mad at everybody, I don't know. But think of someone there that you have affection for, whom you're attached to, and therefore for whom you have affection. So your heart feels pleasant, you know. And that could be your poodle or your bulldog, whichever the dog is. We all tend to have so much attachment for our pets, you know. And we think it's love. But we're going to look at how they're totally different. On to the right, you put a person whom you are indifferent to. And so these the three delusions are enormous attachment, which is an over-exaggeration of their beauty and their deliciousness, an over-exaggeration of their ability to make you happy, an obsession, it's obsessive. Attachment is obsessive. That's attachment, it's obsessive. Only think of that person. That's attachment. Put that person there. Now you have the enemy, and we can also not see them again. The irony is, you'd think you'd never think of them again, but we never stop thinking about the enemy, do we? Kind of ironic. You think if you hate them, you just leave them there. But no, we think of them all the time, even more than the friend sometimes, isn't it? It's ridiculous. So put the person you don't like in front of you, and to the left, so you've got attachment for the beloved. They look divine. You can't stop thinking about them. You've got aversion for the enemy. You can't stop thinking about them either. And now you have indifference, which means you don't think of them at all. They don't even come into your radar. And that's 99.9% of the universe. So of course we go, well, that's normal, Robina. What do you want of me? You know, this is why it's so shocking. The Buddha says we see the world basically in terms of the three poisons: attachment, aversion, indifference. And indifference is a function of the root delusion, ignorance. This is how we see the world. And of course, the point here with equanimity, what we're trying to prove very precisely, is a very precise point, equanimity. We're trying to prove with equanimity that the friend, the enemy, and the stranger, we're trying to prove to ourselves that the friend, the enemy, and the stranger are equal to each other from one point of view. Equal to each other from one point of view. It's very precise. Equal to each other from one point of view, which is that they each want to be happy and each don't want to suffer. That's the logic of equanimity. It's not just some vague feeling, you know, it's very precise. So we have to prove that to ourselves. That's equanimity. And that becomes the foundation upon which you grow love, compassion, great compassion, and eventually culminating in bodhicitta. It's very precise. So how do you do it? Well, you've got to use logic to argue with ego's ridiculous misconceptions. So, okay. Excuse me. So one argument, one bit of logic to use is this one. I find this one quite helpful. So switch it around, have the three people out there and think about this. And now have yourself, you're here, and each of these three is looking at you, right? Now think about your friend. For you, they are a friend. For them, you're the friend, okay? So you can see them looking at you dazzle-eyed. They adore you. They're looking at you with you look shiny, you look lovely. They think you're the cutest thing since sliced bread. So your friend, what they see is friends. They're totally attached to you. They see you through the lenses of their attachment. They see a lovely person. Now look at your enemy and what they see. Look at them looking at you with daggers. You left them, you cheated on them, whatever you did. They can't stand you. All they see is ugly. All they see is mean, nasty, ugly. We know this, isn't it? So you're a friend for one, you're an enemy for another. The third one, they can't even look at you. You're so boring because you're a stranger. They can't be bothered. Who's this boring person? They just glance over, you know, keep looking, isn't it? So this is the thing. 1 minute, you're this divine being for this person, their projection of you. The next person sees you as evil. The third person couldn't care less. You're just boring. So the simple point I'm trying to prove is this. Simple point. Remember, we're trying to prove that these three people are equal from the point of view of wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. Well, look at yourself. Whoever's looking at you, you only want to be happy. Whoever's looking at you, you only ever want to not be suffering. Well, that's exactly the point. 1 minute you're a friend, next minute you're an enemy, next minute you're a stranger, but you're exactly the same all the time. You only want to be happy. You only don't want to suffer. That's how everybody is. But we only see them because we see them only through our lenses. In other words, more brutal, we only see the universe in terms of our own needs. So if you satisfy my needs, honey child, I will love you and have compassion till the cows come home. We're totally self-centered. We should be embarrassed. And the person, the evil person, I mean, the minute you hear your hubby left you for a younger version, it's like love turns off like a tap. Boom, out of the friend category into the enemy category. Isn't it? We know this. We're trying to in other words, with this equanimity meditation, we're trying to get ourselves out of the equation, basically. We're trying to see these three people separate from us. Put yourself in their shoes, our mother would say. We're trying to get yourself out of the equation because right now we are absolutely locked in to us being the center of the universe, and the world appears to us through the lenses of our needs. If you satisfy my needs, you're divine. You deserve my love and have compassion. If you don't, then you don't deserve anything. And if you didn't do either, you don't deserve, you just don't exist. This is how we are, you know. And it seems pretty shocking to think that we should aim or try to want to aim to go to beyond this. I mean, it's exhausting. This is the point. That's not the compassion when you're so intense, you know. This is the starting point. So we're trying to shift the logic that ego has, which I only want to make my friends happy. I only want my friends not to be suffering, to I want everybody to be happy and not suffer. Why? The logic is this. The logic ego uses is because you make me happy. If you make me happy, then I'm prepared to. If you make me happy, I'm prepared to want you to be happy. It's got strings attached, doesn't it? So we're trying to shift that to I want all of you to be happy. And why? Because guess what, honey child? Because you want it. That's a simple logic. And that's a huge shift to make. Just to know it intellectually even is huge. So our problem is, because we have layers of misconceptions in here. So the second we hear that mean person who cheated on me and who did cheat on me, my ex-husband, to suddenly hear, oh, he wants to be happy. The first thing we say immediately is, what do you mean he wants to be happy? He doesn't deserve it. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is how we think now. The deserve one is massive. That's why we only love those who are nice to us. I mean, even you go into a shop, first as a stranger, suddenly they smile at you. They instantly go to the friend category, don't they? And then they get impatient with you. And suddenly you go to the enemy category. You can't stand the sight of that person. And you won't go to that shop again. Just right there in 1 minute, the three can come, you know. All based on whether or not they're nice to you. I mean, then we'll go, well, that's normal. Yeah, it's normal because we've all got it. But the Buddha says it's delusional. It's the cause of your pain, being so fragile. And this brings us really, I mean, the root of all of this, the attachment that's the root of all of this, which they don't really begin to talk about until you get to the bodhisattva path. This attachment is more than just sex and drugs and rock and roll. It's the one it's the closest to ego. And this is the root of this one, is attachment to be seen and loved. Attachment to be seen, attachment to even be seen and to be approved of and validated, which means to be liked. We all crave to be liked. And you've got to ask the question, why? We never ask that question. We never ask the question. Because we assume it's normal. And in fact, our view in the world, I think, the view in modern psychology is rooted in the belief in a very strong, healthy, separate ego. And the way we become reasonable human beings is by being socialized. That's how our psychology talks. In some ways, of course, Buddha would agree, but in other ways, fundamentally different. So the only way you're going to become a decent human being is by being liked and loved by your parents, because we assume you're born as a blank slate and your parents create you. It's not the Buddha's view at all. You come with your own stuff. So you can be, as I said, you can be a person who's coming from a past life with quite a good practice, and you get born due to karma to some parents, let's say, who don't like you. That's grist for your mill. You won't suffer so badly because you even as a child. I remember reading one fellow, I remember years ago when I was working for the prison project, there was one fellow, he wrote a book, a wonderful book actually. What was it called? What's his name? I forget. He's on death row in San Quentin. I don't know if he's still there. He wrote a book called Finding Freedom. I really recommend. I think his name, Jarvis Masters. I think that's his name. Jarvis, anyway, is his first name. And he's a wonderful man. And he wrote these, he started to write while he was in prison. And he wrote this wonderful, like, short stories interspersed with memories of his childhood. And you could tell he was kind, you know, his nature. But in the stories, like he had his typical, like in LA, brought up in South Los Angeles, a junkie mother, all that kind of recipe of what we think is a crazy guy. But he'd be under the table, terrified because the boyfriend's beating up his mum, or she's doing something awful, and he's having compassion for his mother as a little child. That's pretty unusual. I mean, and you can see he had this compassionate heart, even though his mum was a hopeless mum, disaster. He had love and compassion for her. You can see that with some people. Other people can have a really nice, reasonable mother and they think she's a monster. Why? They might be not so good, but what we don't realize is we're seeing our mums through the lens of our own neuroses or our own virtues, one or the other. We don't factor that in our culture. We think our mothers create us literally and then turn us into the person we become. But it just doesn't add up if you look at the different examples, you know. You come with your own stuff. It informs. So if you come into this life quite spiritually developed, you won't have much attachment. Whereas if you come in with masses of attachment, let's say especially attachment to being seen and heard, you'll have what people call abandonment issues. You'll always feel you're never enough. You'll always feel no one ever approved of you. You'll always feel your mother didn't enough for you, didn't do it for your father, didn't do enough. That's how it is. We never realize that we have to factor in ourselves in that story. We always just think it's only coming from the parents. That's the massive thing, I think, I would suggest, in our modern psychological views. We don't factor in the person who comes into this life because we don't have a view, because you came from your mum. Are we communicating?
Yeah.
So when we see a suffering child, the first thing we do is think, what do their parents do to them? You understand? The Buddhist approach is you look into their mind. Wow, they got lots of anger. And we assume mummy caused it. No, they got born with the anger. It's not criticism. It's not being mean. It's helping you understand them. So one child with horrible parents can be quite content. Another child with fairly nice parents can be completely nightmarishly suffering. We know this, but we don't join the dots, you know. So we see everybody through the lens of our own needs, basically. And this attachment to be seen and heard is the most primordial attachment of all, the deepest cause of our suffering. And so, primordial is a good word. So automatic, we don't notice it. That's the trouble. So we have to ask ourselves the question, why am I hungry to be liked? It has to be because you don't think you're worthy. It's sort of obvious. But the Buddha would say you are. Everything you are is already in you. Everything you have is already in you. So this is why the wisdom wing is really like, I love this phrase, becoming your own person. Getting rid of your own neuroses and becoming a joyful, content person. That's the point. With less need, less emotion, less neurotic need. I don't mean conventional sense, but emotional hunger, you know. And that's a bottomless pit. I'm sure we're communicating. So are there any questions, please, people? I haven't really begun to get equanimity yet. Yes.
When an object I see and I have a pleasant response to it.
Yep, that's right.
That's karma.
Yep,
However,
exactly.
if I just sit, like I'm trying to black you out and put a wall between you because I'm thinking you're making me feel good today. So I'm trying to go,
Okay, go on.
if he's not doing that, then can I just have that joy with or without? So I'm trying to sit here and do that.
No, I understand. Okay. No,
That's
no,
not karma.
it's just fine. You know, let's just say you're eating the cake, a simple cake. The joy is coming. Well, own it and be delighted, because every second, this is another whole discussion now, every second of joy is actually the fruit of one of your past virtuous actions. The extent to which you can have any pleasure at all is the fruit of any virtuous karmic seed in your bank vault. The extent to which you can never have any joy is because of your negative karma. People are going to eat cake till the cows come home because they always hate, if they get allergies, they're never going to enjoy cake. So pleasant feelings, this is the most fundamental point. Pleasant feelings and unpleasant feelings are fruits of positive and negative karma. It's as simple and technical as that. So delight in that and be happy with it.
So when you said we're inherently, if we clear up suffering, we're inherently joy, right?
Your mind is naturally joyful.
So then
It's
that's
its
not
nature.
karma, that's its nature. So
Yeah.
then if I can, that's what I'm trying to connect with. So
Well, karma just means you do the job of making it happen. You know, that's all it is. It's just the karma is the intentionally deciding not to harm, intentionally decide not to be angry. It's, you take hold of the natural law of karma and you start to make it a tool that you use, not be a victim of it. That's all. That's the methodology for how to finally taste your true nature. It's the methodology.
thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, sweetheart.
So with attachment,
With attachment, yep.
it's best to remain neutral.
Well, no, it depends. Yeah, put it this way. If you really want to give up attachment, the best method is to give up sex, drugs, rock and roll, mortgages and dogs and everybody else, and become ordained and go to the mountains and get single point of concentration and realize emptiness. That's the quickest method. It's the quickest. If you want to become like, Roger Federer, you can't play tennis once a weekend. You've got to be fully committed to tennis 24 hours a day. It's like that. That's the quickest method. But sweetie pie, 99% of us won't do that. So you've got to do it gradually and slowly. So this is where you've got to notice the attachment. If you're such a junkie for the chocolate cake, let's just say, and it makes you really distressed, you've got to be a bit radical with yourself. Maybe you've got to give it up for a while because it's too difficult. Look at it to alcohol with some people. People have to give up sex because they can't cope. We've got to realize where we're at with our attachment. So if your attachment's not so strong, you notice it, but you be reasonable, you be reasonable. But if you have to be neutral, then you've got to give up the objects. It's a bit too hard to be neutral while you're eating cake. I mean, imagine being an alcoholic, which means strong attachment for alcohol, and then deciding you're going to give up attachment to it while you keep drinking alcohol. It's too hard. You've got to give up the object sometimes. But if it's not that intense and you're not going to be a Federer, do you understand my point? Then you do it, and you notice it, and you kind of calm yourself down. You keep your hand in your lap and don't take a fourth piece, sort of thing, and still have the pleasure. It's okay. Pleasure is not attachment; they're separate. And so if you can have the pleasure and delight in it and not get overexcited, which is attachment, then great. You've got to know your capability. That's the point. You with me? Good.
Thank you.
Yes, Adrian. Yes.
Did you post any retreats?
A bit louder, Adrian. I mean, I have to talk to people on the. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Did you post any retreats so then someone like myself can ordain and then get to that part of non-attachment? But then come back to society.
Of course, yes, you do, absolutely. Or you can be like, many of our friends, one of my friends, I always think about one of my friends called Venerable Rene, he's a Swiss monk. Since he first met the teachings, now it's about 45 years, he met about the same time as me. He just decided that was his path, but he didn't just leap up and go to the mountains. He's done lots of teachings, lots of study, lots of meditating, and then training himself. And then he went and did several, like a 2.5-year retreat. He'd come back and work a bit and go to another 5-year retreat, a 3-year retreat. He's been doing that all his life. You can do it like that. Absolutely. You can be more 100% committed. It's up to each individual person what's their path, for me, it was never an option. For me, I had to for me, it was the working and doing things that's my path. Next life, maybe I'll be ready to do meditation retreat. Do you understand? So you've got to know where you're at and what's right for you. It's really important. And it's possible. Some people, that's the path they choose and they're ready for it.
And I can also, with my action, I can manifest my own destiny. So then I can just make the definitive decision to attain that retreat or that part.
The goal of the retreat.
Yes.
Well, you have to have, you can. Okay, it's like what you're saying. It's like saying, well, I can make $1 million in a year. Theoretically, you could, but you've got to have all the conditions, you've got all the causes, you've got to meet all the right people. There's an awful lot of things that are come into place to make that happen. And if you have got that from your past practice, then you will achieve it. So you've got to be realistic about where you're at. Do you understand my point? You've got to be realistic and have good teachers who can guide you. Because we can easily fool ourselves. Do you understand? Good, Adrian, yes. Yes. Yes, sweetheart.
Thank you. So I'm questioning suffering of change.
Suffering of change. Yes,
And
telling the people.
I'm open to change. I'm separating my mind from my past, my body and mind from my past.
Separating her from her past.
Yeah. So
Telling the Zoom people.
Oh, okay. So I'm feeling good and things are going good and I'm living it and changing and, bringing that into my life. And then in the same time, the unhappy feelings come in.
Yeah.
Now you're saying that's the suffering of change. And
Okay, I see. Yeah. So that's not, no, it's a bit different. So why don't you ask though, nevertheless, suffering of change is quite a technical thing, quite precise, narrow point, that when you're having happy feelings getting the object of attachment, when you get the cake, it brings happy feelings, right? Do you agree?
Yeah.
And the cake's an analogy for anything you get in life. And happy feelings come. But what happens is you're not happy with it. So you keep eating the cake, wanting more happy feelings, but they slowly turn into wanting to vomit. They turn into, so if the suffering of change is related to attachment, which is a fantasy that keeps wanting more happiness, but even when it gets it, it's never satisfied. So you end up eating too much cake and vomiting. It's a simple example. So you're one of So why don't you ask your question about your experience though, because that's a bit different. So just ask your question.
Okay, so I'm like living in bliss and the world's beautiful and things.
So you're living in, you're happy at some time, you're feeling very blissful, the world feels wonderful.
Right.
You've got that
everything
experience, and then what
together
happens?
And one, and then at the same time, all of a sudden, I'm
Bad
like
things happen.
angry.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
And I'm like, oh, I just want to release.
Okay,
this.
okay. So yeah, that is true. That is an example of the suffering of change. So what we have to do, you see, most of the time, how you're talking, we're all like that. One day you'll wake up and just things seem lovely, don't they?
Yeah.
But we don't really analyze very deeply. It just means your attachment, your neediness isn't so strong and you're feeling more content. But because we're not stable in that practice, suddenly something can come that you hardly even notice that disturbs your peace, and then it changes. That's because we're not stable in sustaining the happy feelings. We're being pulled from pillar to post. We're too susceptible to the external world. Suddenly nice things happen, we get excited, then a mean noise comes, you get unhappy. It's because we're not stable in our practice,
And
is the
so
real answer. I beg your pardon?
So
Practicing
practice
every day, practicing dealing with problems when they arise, recognizing its attachment. You see, aversion, which is what you're describing, is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. And we start to realize this attachment is quite deep, and it's always an assumption that lovely things should happen. And when lovely things do happen, we get lovely feelings. And we think, oh, wow, I'm so happy, everything's wonderful. And then we go crashing down because we're not stable enough to not respond to the loud noise or the mean word. We get dragged from pillar to post.
Yeah, and I recognize it, but I don't know where it came from.
That's right, because we just have to become, that's why the fundamental point in Buddhism is to develop a good daily practice. And what we're learning to do more than anything is become very self-aware. And as you study the Buddha's teachings, if you choose to, it gives you an analysis that you can apply to your mind.
Okay.
In other words, it's the same with any body of knowledge. You can have a general idea about nutrition, but if you study it very deeply, you get very intricate in your knowledge, don't you? And you can see the tiniest shift in your body because of that knowledge. It's the same with the knowledge about your mind, which is what Buddhism has. You get my point now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
Thank
Thank you, sweetheart. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Good. Good.
I just ask you a question about karma.
Karma. Okay. I'm going to repeat for the
Came up
Zoomers.
to me last night.
Yes.
after your
Yes.
teaching.
Yeah.
So all the illnesses that either ourselves or our loved ones develop,
Yes. Illnesses. We all develop. Yes.
are they all from karma?
Yes.
Karmic life?
Yes. Absolutely. But see, what's your name?
Luciana.
Luciana. So Luciana, this is an interesting point. Also, every moment of happiness, every moment of good health, every moment of having money in the bank, every moment of people being kind to you, every moment of everything that we call good is also, every one of them, the fruit of past karma. So we should own those and be happy with those and delight in ourselves, but we tend to take the good things for granted, and then we get shattered when the bad things happen. But fruits, weeds and flowers are both the fruit of seeds. Do you see my point? So all the happy feelings, all the good experiences and the bad are all the fruit of our own past actions. That's what the Dalai Lama calls karma self-creation. Everything we experience is the fruit of our past actions. We are, in a sense, our own creator, but not just the bad things. We tend to think of karma as only the bad things. That's a big mistake. Do you understand my point? Because the thing is, because attachment's so hungry for nice things, when we get nice things, we tend to take them for granted. Do you get my point here? We rest on our laurels. And then when the bad thing happens, we get shattered. But we both are the fruit of karma. So when all the good things happen, if every day you wake up and you delight that you're not dead yet, and your hubby's still there being nice to you, and there's money in the bank and food in the fridge, don't take it for granted. Go, wow, this is amazing. I must have practiced generosity in a past life and morality. I must not waste this precious life. Becomes very optimistic. Do you understand?
Yes, absolutely.
Good.
Thank you.
Good.
Part B is,
Go.
so knowing that the person who is suffering with an illness, terminal illness.
Yeah, I would say a person got terminal illness. Yeah.
Okay, knowing that.
Yes.
That's karma.
Yes. Yes.
How would you suggest the person close to them
Yes. Help them.
help?
I understand your point exactly. So there's first of all, not just, so let's just first look at the person. Let's pretend it's you has got the sickness. This is if you do have the view of karma and you really are trying to practice. And even if you are, especially if you're on the bodhisattva path, which is a more advanced one, then you're going to be trying to be so happy you're sick because you're cleaning up your karma. It's purification. So if that will be, so that's for yourself, and that can really help sustain you through difficult times. That, okay, this is all due to my karma, but look what I'm having, this suffering experience, but I'm happy I'm getting rid of it. The dirt is coming out, as Lama Zopa would put it. So that's a really good view for yourself. Now, when you know that for your mummy, your old mum in bed who's sick, but if she doesn't want to, she's never heard of karma, you don't tell her about that. But you know that maybe she's being, you try to be loving and kind and sweet and patient. So it's according to the other person where they're at. So no matter what you do, you help them because that's compassion. So the fact is, you see, this is why I think it's an interesting point in our culture. We only tend to have compassion for people that we think are innocent victims, which means they didn't do anything to deserve it. And we mean in this life. But if you take the view of many lifetimes, in the sense we all deserve the happiness we get and we all deserve the suffering we get, but it's heavy to talk about it like that. So Buddhism doesn't say deserve, but we hear it that way. Whereas if you realize we're all like that, everybody's in the same boat, then of course, that's what compassion is. You know, you have compassion for your mum, she's suffering, and she doesn't know why she's suffering, or even you have compassion for your angry husband who wants to kill you because you can see he's harming himself terribly. Do you get my point here? So you have compassion and you do what you, okay, you've got to leave the hubby. You don't want to keep getting beaten, but you help your darling mum because she's suffering, you know. So everybody's suffering the results of their past karma. It's not just that you only help people who aren't suffering from the results of their past karma. And that's the basis of your real compassion, because everybody thinks everybody else is the cause of their suffering. Do you understand? Do you understand me? Good. Thanks, Luciana. Yes.
Thank you for coming. I've been watching you the last 2 nights on Zoom.
Oh, good.
So I'm glad to be here today.
Good, happy. Yes, happy.
I had an incident and it stays with me, and I think I did the wrong. I think you've already answered.
Okay,
I'll
go
tell
on.
you what it is.
It's good. Let's hear it.
I'm sitting at the bar, my husband's here. And
You're sitting in the bar with a husband,
Yes, having a drink. and
having a
some-
drink
Another man comes in, sits on this other side.
of you.
Yes, and the 3 of us begin to talk.
3 of them began to talk in the bar.
Right. And he's a lawyer.
He's a
and,
lawyer.
He's a nice guy.
Nice
and I
guy.
like him, okay? And then we're talking about horses, and he begins.
Talking about horses. This is a good
he
story.
begins to tell about how much he enjoys riding his horse with the dogs and some other people, and they are chasing a fox.
Oh, okay. So he talks about how he's enjoying going on his horses with his dogs and chasing a fox.
And
Okay. And shoots the fox. What do they do to the fox?
Well,
They shoot it.
Yes.
They shoot the fox. Then,
I
and you start to give him a lecture.
First I just say, well, how did you receive pleasure from that? And it's really a lot of fun. And then I just said, well, I can't agree. I can.
Okay.
Do no harm.
And she talks about how can he get pleasure from that and gives a talk about no harm. So how did he respond?
He gets quiet.
Of course he
My
did.
husband's Quiet.
Of course.
And I'm upset about what he said, so I excuse myself and go to the bathroom.
That's right. So she gets up and goes to the toilet because she's the master.
He's gone.
Of course he's gone. That's right. No, that's right. I know exactly. You know exactly the answer. It's a really good piece of advice. This is what's so interesting is because the fact of the matter is you're going to meet people every day who do harmful things. I remember one time on a plane meeting this fellow next to me and he started chatting. Well, he was not naked, but he was nakedly a white supremacist. So I just didn't want to give him a lecture. I sat there and listened to his mind. I was fascinated in his views. I didn't agree or disagree, and I could see some opportunity. I might ask a question, but what was the benefit? I mean, if he was able to hear something, then I would say it. Maybe some things I said might have triggered a little thought, but more than anything, my thought was, there's this human being next to me. He's got a heart too, not being sentimental, not just agreeing with what he's saying, but, whatever wisdom you've got, do you understand? would be that there's a real being in front of you, this guy, but because we have attachment to our views, and you might be right, then you get upset when you don't get it.
Yes.
That's the learning, honey.
That's the
It's a
attachment.
really good point. That's the attachment, yeah. So, but depending on the person, let's say it's another person who's really struggling with their enjoying killing the fish, then you might have a bigger opportunity to have a discussion. Like I said to Melissa, where's Melissa, about talking to her grandchild. You don't give them a lecture, but you open a discussion. So you could have done that, and it might have made the guy think. But mostly, if you've got a strong attachment like that, you can't hear it, you know. So you know exactly the answer. It was a very good learning, right? Well done. Yeah,
Following up on Luciana.
yeah.
um,
Luciana's point, yeah.
And this is a tough question.
Yes.
That somebody has to ask.
Good.
Um, The other night, last night, you talked a bit about collective
Yes.
karma. So, do you think that the Holocaust and AIDS
Yeah.
could be the
Collective karma.
ripening
Yeah.
of
Yes,
karma
of course.
for those groups?
Yes, I talk about this in Israel. Of course. And the many Tibetan Buddhists in Israel, they love karma. So yes, it's exactly right. The Tibetans, 1 million of 6 million Tibetans were slaughtered and continue to be by the Chinese communists. So for them, because that's their view, they totally have that view. That's just their world view. So of course, there's the Buddhist view. That's why I always try to talk it in the broadest way possible. The natural law of the universe, Buddha says, that no one made, no one created it, no one did it, no one runs it. It's not punishment, it's not reward. It's a natural law that everybody creates the cause for future happiness by virtuous thoughts and virtuous actions, and everybody creates the cause of future suffering by non-virtuous actions and non-virtuous thoughts. It's a very simple presentation, but it's almost so simple we can't hear it because we've got layers and layers of guilt and blame and not fair and creators and all the other business. So absolutely, there's not a single thing that could happen to you that you didn't cause. Not possible, impossible.
So in the case of AIDS, it's a little bit easier to imagine non-virtuous, I think.
Creating sickness.
can
Well, I
say
mean,
that.
creating sickness really is sickness, isn't it?
Cause and effect.
Yeah, no, but sickness, AIDS is a label for a disease. So forget about the collective side. AIDS is the label for a disease. Well, so is cancer, so is a cough. They're just diseases. And if your body is not functioning properly, it's due to the cause of your mind from past actions, which impacts upon the physical. There's a whole analysis of it in the Vajrayana teachings, especially. So collective one just means lots of people experience it. Or like with the Tibetans or with the Jews and whoever they were in Germany, you know, you experience it as a group, because we do things as groups. And always suffering as a group seems more powerful to us, doesn't it? But we do things in groups. So it could be from 1,000 lifetimes ago that the people called Nazis and the people called German Jews or whoever had this intense karma between each other. The Chinese communists, the Tibetans, they could have been labeled who knows what 1,000 lifetimes ago. It's a very big, long-term kind of picture. But we hear it because we have a very deep philosophical view of fair and unfair, and of innocent victims and of naughty people, and of creators and punishment and reward. That gets in the way of this simple idea. You understand?
Yeah, but it's not easy to pinpoint hypothetical, non-virtuous.
What do you mean by pinpoint? If you get so what do you mean by pinpoint? You mean locate what action did it?
It's not easy to identify any non-virtuous activities or events among the people that were affected.
Oh, okay, but in
by
this
the
life,
Holocaust.
but nothing to do with this life. It's from 1,000 lifetimes, 2,000 lifetimes ago. Because everything we think, if we take the view, the Buddhist view, all I can do is tell you this: beginningless continuity of consciousness, every being. So every millisecond that consciousness is existing, it's doing something negative, positive, or indifferent. It's just the nature of it. And that drops seeds in the mind that will then ripen in the future as types of rebirth, tendencies, experiences, and environmental. That's it's just the universe. It's the Buddha's view of the analysis of the natural law that runs the universe. It's a natural law. So we've all got billions of karmic seeds in our mind. And if we don't, and so we have to learn to be in control of that law. Like botany is a natural law that runs gardens. You don't just watch it, especially in Florida, and let it do what it wants. You can learn the law and harness it to your advantage. That's what a practitioner is trying to do. So that means you recognize that every experience. I mean, even in ordinary life, if you love M&Ms and then one day you come out with whatever you call it in your skin, you don't know which M&M on which day, but you can get the general learning. It's, oh God, it's the M&Ms again. So then but as you progress spiritually and as you get practicing single point of concentration, your mind will become powerful. You'll see the past, you'll see the future. Eventually, you'll be able to know exactly what you did, which life when. You have that level of wisdom, but you can learn the general principles and you apply those rules. So, I mean, that's why the story I told about the young Tibetan nuns who were invited by Richard. You heard that story. You weren't here. You know, yeah, that because karma's their view, it even became the basis of their compassion for their torturers. So they knew why they were suffering. So that's what interesting point. They had an analysis. It could be anything. I mean, if you've got faith in God, that could also be your analysis. I'm not complaining, but we're using the Buddhist one here, which they had that analysis that enabled them not to go crazy, that enabled them to deal with their pain and suffering. If they could have, they would have got out of prison, but they couldn't stop the torturers. They couldn't stop being sexually abused. So they found the inner strength based on their philosophy to work with it. And then even were able to have compassion for the people who did it to them, because they're going to suffer unbearably in the future. So everything's to do with the view you have. And we don't tend to analyze if we have a viewpoint. We do all have a viewpoint, but it tends to be an instinctive one of not fair, guilt, blame, how dare, blah, 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 you know? Do you understand?
I guess it's hard to imagine, because we're talking about groups of people.
But why is it hard to imagine? Have a look at the world now. Do you not notice groups of people doing bad things and good things together?
We think, or I think of karma as individualistic.
But it is, but groups of people. There's a group of people called Russian boys, and there's a group of people called Ukrainian boys or men harming each other. Do you agree? Can you see that?
Yeah.
Well, there you were, right there. One group is doing it to another. Well, that group will have it done to them. I mean, it goes on and on and on. You punch me, I'm likely to punch you right back. But we forget punches from 2.5 lives ago.
What is it that whole groups of
Sorry, say it again.
people,
What?
or what is it that whole groups of Jewish people or whole groups of Catholics or whole groups of homosexuals did
Yeah.
in the past?
You have to analyze the experience to find out. Okay. Okay. Good question. Really, hang on. Yeah, really good question. We can see that the third kind of karma is called experiences similar to the cause. So forget the AIDS one. I don't think it's just gay people, is it? Was it mainly? It was at some point mainly, but it's not actually. It's just a disease. I mean, that's one. I find that somehow that's a false kind of relationship in a way. I don't know. I don't know what to say. Yeah, but the Jewish one or the Tibetan one is a good example. So the experience is similar to the cause kind of karma is how you're seen and treated by others. That's the third way karma ripens. So clearly being, so if you look at, say, for example, an action called lying, one way lying can manifest in your life is you wake up with a tendency to lie. The other one is people will lie to you or not believe your words. So if you have that particular experience of no one ever believing you, you can deduce, okay, I must have done past lying. It's fairly evident, the type of experience, not random. If you never can make ends meet, if people don't pay their debts, you can see it's from stealing or something. It's sort of psychologically fairly sound. Well, sweetie pie, if you're being brutalized and harmed and tortured, it's hardly surprising to think what the cause would be. I think it's not so much we find it hard to understand it. We just find it a bit shocking that we might have done negative things. That's really mainly the point. I mean, equally, you're saying you might as well ask why a group of people in like one little Swiss village where there's no thieving and it's clean and beautiful and everyone's rich. We don't go, wow, what could a group of people done to deserve that? Well, look at their experience. That's what they've done. And I think if we look at us, and not just as humans, look at animals. We're all going from animals to humans. I think we have a tendency to do terrible things to each other. And then karma ripens and karma, or like, look at the power people use to harm each other, brutalizing power. I mean, the Nazi one is very much also not just being brutalized, but power. And also the one of isms, race, partiality to certain groups, hating one group. I mean, that's exactly the Nazi experience. Look at the experience of Black Americans, or whatever it is. Every group, there's going to be a group who doesn't like you, and you're labeled in those terms. So there's a multitude of actions that are there. all we can do is think about it like this. Isn't it? And it's not blame, not guilt. It's just we're all in the same boat to one degree or another, it seems to me. That's why those young women. And of course, we had compassion for our torturers because they're going to suffer in the future. That's why I always think of, like, you know, you think of a pedophile. Nobody has compassion for a pedophile, but his mum does.
Yes.
You know, because you know why? Because she sees he's harming himself. That's where that's why you got to first know your own pain and suffering and know your own delusions and want to go beyond them because you don't want suffering. Then that gives you the space to have compassion for others because we all harm ourselves, not to mention harming others. Do you understand? All I can do is say these words, which is what I use to try and put this picture together, you know. Yes.
So if someone is suffering some chronic illness, physical
Yes,
illnesses,
yes.
and it perhaps comes from the past, how do they presently practice karma to go forward and get rid of some of those?
I understand
physical-
exactly. It's the same thing as if the boss is being mean to you or someone's torturing you. It's the same principle. It's due to some actions. If you have the view of karma, like I said here to Luciana, you try to have that analysis. You try to use it to your advantage instead of overwhelmed. It's not fair. Poor me. Why is it happening to me? Which is what we get. You kind of own it, and then of course you try to get better. But also, if you do purification and you regret the harm you've ever done to others, you regret the suffering you cause others, that can help purify it. And it certainly cleans it up for the future. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Sylvia.
So my mom passed away when she was 56.
Sylvia's mum passed away when she was 56.
So it's 14 years ago, and she passed away for cancer.
Cancer.
She was sick for 3 years. So in the karma law, you will say she died not very young, but she was young,
Yeah.
and because of an illness, right?
Yes, right, exactly.
So that means that you mentioned a different
Types of karma.
Yes.
This one of dying young, in general dying young, whether it's from sickness or just dying, is the kind of karma called experiences similar to the cause, and the cause is past harming or killing from countless lifetimes, you know. And so her gas tank of health, gas tank of virtue, of morality, of non-harming runs out and she gets sick and dies.
So the last 8 months of her life, she was in this purification state.
Yeah.
Cleaning, and so she passed away.
Yeah.
And she is here now.
Well, she's taken another rebirth of one kind or another. We don't know
And
what.
it's necessary that is close to the people that.
Not necessarily. No, I mean, it could very well be, of course. It depends on the kind of, you've got countless options of types of rebirth.
Okay.
So we have many karmic connections with many different beings over many, many lifetimes. And it can be, you know, like if let's say you're born in Tibet and you're a Tibetan monk and you're completely Buddhist, 100% Buddhist, it's very likely you get born in Tibet again because the karma is so strong for that. But let's say you've got karma, you know, to a very narrow-minded person, very fundamentalist, and you're born in, you're a child in Ukraine, you might get born as some little, you know, group of people in the other end of the world who are also that kind of mind. It's a more, karma really is the way we label race and male, female, all these labels, they're just for states, different kinds of states of mind. So you get born where you've got that state of mind suits you. Do you understand? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you might get born in one life be very fundamentalist religious, next life you get born as a fundamentalist communist, you know. It's the kind of mind that you've got where you get born. It suits your nature. You're attracted to that. People like that. Do you understand? It could very well be the same people. Yeah.
I have a question regarding, let's say, Lama Zopa illness.
Lama Zopa's
or-
illness, yeah.
or the stroke he has.
The stroke, yeah.
They're like highly bright beings and
Uh-huh.
with such a pure like mind. and
Yes,
this
that's right. Highly
incredible
evolved being.
knowledge-
That's right.
Knowledge about
Yes.
everything.
Yes,
like
exactly.
clairvoyant, like
Yes. So the
highly-
question,
highly beings.
the question is,
The question is, so they having all these very human, basic situations with the body.
Right, so the question is,
The question is, why?
okay, or if we're ordinary people, meaning we're deluded, you know, got delusions and we're following samsara, we've got attachment and anger, then it is what it is. But honey child, you can be these high beings, even the lowest level bodhisattva, and there are 10 stages of bodhisattvas. Even the lowest level bodhisattva at some point even doesn't even need, or some level of bodhisattvas, they don't even need to be reborn, darling. They finish, they've got choice, but they choose to be reborn and they choose to take bodies. A bodhisattva can choose to be reborn as a little, you know, a little child who's got no legs and no arms and suffer terribly every day as a practice for them and as their practice of compassion to their parents. There's more for them as another whole kettle of fish. It's not just regular karma. Not possible. If you're a high being, you can't have that. But depending on the person, it could be still the fruit of your karma, but it's all part of your own process. It's all part of your purification. And it's a very quick way for you to get purified because you're happily taking it upon yourself. But you don't know where a person's at. Lama Zopa, from his side, I mean, if he's my Lama and your Lama, so we see him as a Buddha, but we don't know if he is a Buddha. So whatever, wherever, but if he is a Buddha, it's not possible to be suffering. It's just play acting for our benefit. Are you understanding?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Very happy to see you. again.
Good, darling. What's your name? Tell us your name.
Giovanna,
Joanna. Okay, talk.
I was thinking about this, that we're talking about, driving, and I was thinking that this is kind of not fair. That
Talking about not fair.
that a child. that
Yes,
has,
exactly.
dies of-
That a child can have suffering. Yeah.
I'm here and-
Yeah.
and s-
Thinking
one
about all that.
person
I understand that, darling. So what's the question? That's what you're thinking about.
came- this
Okay.
thought
Go,
came to his brain.
go.
Then I thought, I've been that child who died of, and I've been in a concentration camp.
In
and-
countless lives, you mean?
Yes, or I could be that.
Could be that child, yeah.
It is
Well, I
that-
mean, the very simple way of putting it, sweetheart, is that a child of 2, 3 years ago was a 90-year-old pedophile. I mean, we don't like that though. Because we
Right.
think a child is innocent, who is made as an innocent baby coming, and that's why if God made, that's why the Christian view is, it doesn't fit with this view. A child, by definition, we're all innocent children made by God. So then it doesn't fit that you can then get abused by a pedophile. But the Buddhist view is we've all done, the 90-year-old pedophile dies, but got some other virtue, and that causes them to be born as a little cute little girl next life.
Right.
you see
and
my point?
So to stop my judgment,
What, darling?
to stop my judgment.
You mean your anger towards them? How dare they?
I could say, well, that would be my fate.
Of course, I mean, of course, darling, of course, that's a part of it. That's why those young Tibetan nuns had compassion for the torturers, their own torturers. They knew why it was happening to them. They worked with that. And they realized that these people torturing and sexually abusing are creating heavy negative karma, and they will only suffer in the future as a result of that. That's the basis of compassion for others. But it's got to be first yourself, the karmic one. Yeah.
Right now I found something, or I'm practicing something in my daily life
You're practicing something in your daily life. Go on.
that brings me immense satisfaction.
That brings you satisfaction. Okay.
I should have been doing this for years. It was probably in my path. and I
That's okay.
just
Yeah, go on.
threw it away.
So then,
What do you do, like physically, what do you do with that?
I'm losing you a little bit, your idea, the concept. What's happening?
We're talking today about the things that we're attached to and things that bring us joy. When you do feel that joy, what do you do with that?
So, okay, what you're saying is at a point in your life where something causes you to be joyful.
Yes, right now that I have this flow of joy, what do you?
What, but I know that, I know, but wait a minute. Are you, I mean, you were talking about it as well, joy. So what do you mean by joy? What are you talking about? You have to be more practical. I don't want to have to give us sacred secrets away, but what do you mean?
Let's say I'm thinking to do joy instead of.
What do you mean by doing? You've got to give me an example because it might be diluted. But excuse me, darling, people have got the karma to kill, they get orgasms from it. So what do you mean by, what are you doing to get that joy?
So I'm working and I submitted a case and it changed a person's life.
Okay, so good, in your job, a good thing happened. Okay, so what you're saying is,
By read or.
okay, so what you're saying is, I'm trying to tell the Zoom people, what's your name again?
Giovanna.
Giovanna. Giovanna. But Giovanna's saying, what does she do with the pleasure she gets from doing a really good job in helping people, is what you've just said. Well done, girl. Delight in it. Delight that you've helped people and delight in the joy. Be happy with it and keep moving. That's it. Don't make it complicated. But if you start getting attached to it and thinking you're so special, and then you get upset because people don't praise you, then you're in trouble. Just enjoy and be happy, darling. Any moment of pleasure we can have, especially from helping other people. If it's pleasure from killing people, I suggest you look twice. Are you communicating? Thank you. All right, darling. Time for lunch. Time for lunch, Gemma. We can take more, Luciana. We can do more later.
Yeah, so we're going to break for an hour and we'll pause the Zoom and we're going to also be closing the Gampa in 15 minutes, in 10 minutes. So take your belongings with you. We're eating in the hall and get your water and we'll set up. So volunteers needed to set up the food. And I think that's it.
Can we just do, I'm going to go out somewhere. Margaret and
Oh, no,
Anna.
Jackie's coming.
Oh, she's going to take me out for lunch.
You're going to eat here with her.
No,
You want to go out, whatever you want.
no, this is why you're closing the Gompa.
For you. Yes.
No, absolutely wrong.
Okay.
People can use the Gompa. I
Okay.
wondered about it. No,
Okay.
wrong,
Well, I also-
wrong.
yes,
I will
thank
go
you.
out with Jackie.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you. Very kind. So why don't we just do a little blessing of the food? Think of the food on the table and think of just even all the beings who cooked it, who've gone to the shop and got it and cut it and cooked it, and the people who made the plates, and the little animals who might have died, even if you're not eating meat, all the creatures died on the way, you know. So we think of all that and we think, I'm going to eat this delicious food so I can be fat and healthy, so I can continue to be a benefit to other people and develop my own qualities. That's it. Okay, now you have a good motivation. So now once you've done that, Mama Zoga says, the bigger your stomach, the better. All right. See you all. You're going to have your own lunch or your own breakfast, whatever you're going to do, you guys. Thank you, darling. See you soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wonder why you closed the box. I thought, no,
Yeah,
that's
no,
all.
I saw.
Okay. Is that on? Yes, it is. Hello, people. So I think it's good if we ask some questions now about anything. There have been quite a few questions. Let's have some more questions about this. We've just touched on, you know, the topic here is equanimity, but we're going back and forth, isn't it, to the mind and karma. So talk to me, people. Yes. Go, sweetheart. You go first. Go on. It's okay. Talk to me. Tell us your name and then speak.
Gladys. I have
Who, sweetheart?
Gladys.
Who?
Gladys.
Gladys.
I can't hear the first syllable.
Gladys.
Spell it.
Gladys.
Oh, as we say in Australia, Gladys.
Yeah.
Now I get you, darling. Gladys. Talk to me, sweetheart.
So I just had the experience right now doing lunch on the chocolate cake. I had a macaroon, I had a bite, it was delicious. I had the second one, but the third one I was sick and I'm drinking ginger tea.
That's exactly right. We understand.
Okay, so my practice would be after the first bite to be aware. What would be the practice?
You know, no, true. It's true. Absolutely. A very practical approach is to, you know, to notice that the attachment is the little hungry, emotional hunger is there, attachment. That's there all the time, anticipating, getting all excited. And then you have the cake and you have the pleasure. You just become more, be more delighted and have some, I mean, the simplest practice is to have the discipline. We all know it. Our mummies taught us to have the discipline, not to have too much, to put your hand, keep your hand in your lap. Because when you see, the point of that one is because I think we tend to confuse a full stomach with being satisfied. But that's how I would eat. I would eat until I was stuffed. But that's not satisfaction. My mind was still miserable. So when you realize satisfaction is a mental state, you get my point? A mental state. This is no good. It's making terrible noise. Constant. I just have to hold it. I mean, it wasn't making a noise before. Why is it making a noise now? What? No, before it was not making a noise.
Correct, but the microphone, I think, was, yes.
What's the difference? I had it over here before.
I think
Same.
maybe the,
So we'll see. I don't know why, but we'll see. So there's a big difference between satisfaction, which doesn't come naturally. You see, we keep thinking satisfaction will come. That's why we have a second piece. So we've got to practice knowing it won't come from a cake. You'll just get more dissatisfied. So you've got to practice the discipline of taking that moment of pleasure and then having the discipline to not have too much. That's the simple practice. In other words, we've got to discipline, got to control your hand. You see, it's making a noise all the time. I'll just have to hold it. Don't worry. Doesn't matter. Are you seeing my point? It's discipline.
Okay, my second question is how.
But did you hear the first one?
Huh?
Did you hear the first answer?
Yes.
Oh, I'm very happy.
Discipline. Yeah, the discipline. But my second question is, how would you do that? Also that practice with people, because then we also attribute those same qualities.
Sorry,
to
darling, what do you
people.
mean with people?
I might see someone and say, oh, this person is wonderful.
So I'm really confused. Start again the second part of the question.
So the second part is, how would I not attribute those same qualities to people?
I don't understand the question.
Don't
Say it in another way.
maybe the exaggeration.
Yeah, so attachment is coming from emotional hunger, feeling I haven't got enough. So then it exaggerates
Right.
the deliciousness of the cake or the boyfriend. Okay, so then question.
Yes, that's the question. So
Question?
what will be the practice of the discipline?
Well, you know what? It's the same. But you know, when we're in love, we just want to be there day and night, 24 hours a day until you're exhausted. That's the problem. It seems really not fair because when you've got attachment to somebody, look at your baby. Okay, your baby, there's some reason because they need you. But the new boyfriend, we both, when you got attachment, we're like hungry ghosts. We just want to have sex day and night. But we know eventually you get exhausted and bored and then you get shattered because he doesn't call you again. So we understood the energy of attachment, that it's like a junkie and never get satisfied. Then you'd have discipline in your relationship as well. And you'd control your mouth and not blast out and not get angry and jealous. And then you might have a decent relationship. So it means controlling it. It's really reasonable. But it just sounds like you're not allowed to have pleasure. It's not saying that. It's the quality of the pleasure that will actually grow when you have discipline, both with the person and the cake. And I think it makes sense, don't you think? Don't you think so?
Yeah.
But it's hard work. Detachment is such a drive, you know, such a powerful drive. This noise is continuing and it never did it before. Why is it doing it now? I hate this microphone. Take it away. Is there not another one?
yeah.
Give us another one. Just I'll hold it. I'll hold it. Give it to me. That's much better. Probably do the same damn noise, but we'll see. But is it for application or for recording? Is it for amplification? Then we don't need a bloody microphone. Excuse me, as we'd say in Australia. You can hear me. No?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, come on.
We can all hear you.
So now, please, thank you, I'm glad. Excuse me. Okay, anyone more questions? Yes, sweetheart.
And as a result of a non-virtuous action I may do in my lifetime now, can that negative karma ripen now?
Good question. Luciana wants to know if a negative action does in this life can ripen in this life. They say, it's a very fascinating point, actually. They say in general, at the time, like I said before, about the time of your death, the karmic seed that will determine your human birth in this case was triggered. Then all the karmic seeds for all your personality traits were triggered at the same time, before you even stopped breathing. Then all the experiences you're going to have at the hands of all the people who you're going to meet in your karmic relationships was all triggered. And even the environmental. So your whole entire next life was all set up. All from things you've done before. So then you get born and then you proceed to live out those seeds. Now, what you do with those seeds also can then create more seeds for the future, but it can also impact on the current seeds. So let's say you've got the karma to, let's say you've got some tendency to steal. But you can decide to stop stealing. So, that can impact therefore on everything else. But if you just follow mindlessly whatever arises in your mind, which is how most people live their lives, oh, this is who I am, I just steal, this is just my nature, then we just keep making it worse. So in general, most of what we experience in this life is from past lives. The seeds take time to ripen, but some heavy duty actions, negative and positive, can ripen in this life.
So I'd like to ask you about this
Yeah, good.
example. So someone in my relation to my family.
In her relation to her family, a person
Was a hunter.
was a hunter.
Was
Okay.
a trophy hunter.
A trophy hunter. Okay.
For beautiful animals.
Yes. Sure.
And this person then developed Parkinson's disease. and
Okay.
could no longer hunt.
Exactly. I understand.
So would that be an
I understand that.
example
I
of-
understand. Okay. I mean, no, probably mostly not. But like very heavy action. Let's say a person, they say the relationship between your mother and father is a very strong karma from past history. You've got an intense relationship with mummy and daddy. So maybe you do something terrible to your mother and father. That could be a karma that could ripen immediately. You might get really harmed or something. But in general, the normal ones we do of killing. But the point is, you see, it's not as if it doesn't have an effect right now. It's okay. There's the fisherman, the trophy hunter, whatever. So they're due to killing in the past. They're born with that tendency now. So then they live it out. So every time they're killing now, that sows seeds for more future suffering, but also it impacts upon all the other karma. So that could that would hasten, perhaps you could argue, that killing now, not as if that would ripen as Parkinson's, but what it would do would be trigger the karma he'd already created to get Parkinson's. It would allow it to come more quickly. Equal with good karma as well. If you're really generous now, you might win the lottery in a week. That generosity now is not the direct cause of the lottery. That's from past generosity, and your present generosity triggers it. It's like nourishment on it. That's how it works. Do you understand, darling? Yeah, good. Yes, sweetheart.
My name's Crystal.
What's your name, Kristen?
Crystal.
Crystal. There's Crystal talking. Go, sweetheart.
So I have a question about the attachment to be seen and loved.
Crystal wanted to know about attachment to be seen and loved and heard and validated and approved of.
And yeah,
Yes.
why am I hungry for that?
That's right. Yes. Why am I
So
hungry for that?
That's a good place to start. is to
Yes.
ask the
Well, let's
question.
just ask that question, Crystal.
Okay.
And the answer is because we don't feel we are anybody. That's the irony of attachment. You see, why attachment brings dissatisfaction is this. This is the reason, the habit of dissatisfaction. One of the consequences is I am nothing. I am nobody. We feel that. So the more you feel you're nothing and nobody in yourself, the more you want other people to say, hello, Crystal, aren't you nice? Then we feel, wow, I must be okay. That's how seriously unhappy we all are, because it's a normal thing. So we have to look at why is dissatisfaction a result of practicing attachment. It's very technical. Let's look at it. So attachment is this emotional hunger, which already implies I'm not enough, isn't it? Why would you be hungry, whether it's for food or anything? It's because you feel like you're lacking something. So attachment, one of the main consequences of attachment from past habit is you wake up with this dissatisfaction. Okay, now why? Well, it's like this. Attachment is like you've got a $50 note, but you are so convinced from practice that actually it's 500. So in other words, you exaggerate the value of that $50. Attachment exaggerates the value of something. It exaggerates the deliciousness of the cake. It exaggerates the deliciousness of the boyfriend. It exaggerates the deliciousness of everything. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's one of its functions. So if you keep, and then so well, you have your $50, you believe it's 500, you get all excited. That's what it anticipates. You're going to go out with that boyfriend. You believe he's the answer to all your prayers. He's going to bring you all your happiness. You got your entire life mapped out based on this boyfriend. That's how attachment is. It's intense. It's insane. So you're insanely exaggerating the boyfriend. You've set in stone this entire life. You imagine the house. You imagine the kids. It's complete fantasy. Do you understand? So you've exaggerated the value of $550. Then you go to spend it. What are you going to get is terrible disappointment. It's not 500. So you build that up, and that dissatisfaction grows and grows and grows. So next life you build up with this sense of I'm not worthy. So then you exaggerate everything, and then you go to get it and you're bitterly disappointed again. And then you go to get it again and you're bitterly disappointed again. So disappointment is what dissatisfaction is. I'm not enough. I'm nothing. I'm nobody, you know. So it's because we don't think we're worthwhile. We don't think we're anything. And the more attachment we show, it shows the more we think we're nothing.
So
Do you hear that?
yeah. And inside, I don't believe that. Like,
We don't believe
inside
what?
that there's a desire to that I am loved, that I am.
Sorry, no, what? The desire, what's, so be more precise. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Start again. I told you there's a story. So tell me how, do you understand that voice that I'm talking about? I'm not worthy,
Yeah.
which is why we're hungry for other
I
people.
hear it.
So what are you saying inside you? What?
But inside wants to fight that, inside.
No, so you hear that, you understand that part.
Yeah,
So then what is going on inside you?
so inside my true nature and my true desire is to be.
That you are already this marvelous person. You've got the potential to be this marvelous person. That's what practice is. So then I want to grow this marvelous person.
Yeah,
So I'm going to
how
give
do
up
I
attachment.
grow
I'm going to give up anger. I'm going to give up harming so I can become this marvelous person that is my potential. That's the practice. So then point, or that's what you want to say.
Yeah, that's what I want.
That's practice, darling. So one of the key things there is the impulse to believe we're nothing is very deep. So we have to counteract it. We have to argue with it repeatedly. It's
Okay.
not true, Crystal. I am worthy. I do have enough.
Okay.
So then we'll start to learn to become our own person and stop craving so much other people. But the irony is, it's like, we talk about it in the West, we call it codependence. It's a great thing. So you're hungry for some beautiful boy, he's hungry for some beautiful girl, and you come together and you're literally propping each other up in this really unhealthy code. In other words, I can't be happy until the boyfriend says you're divine, Robina, and he can't be happy until I say you're divine, honey. But so both these peanuts telling each other they're divine. Why, if he's a peanut, would I rely upon his opinion? It's a joke. Are we communicating? You've got to become your own friend. You've got to literally, the Buddha doesn't say it like this, but that's effectively what we're talking about. This is hard work.
And then I have another question.
Good.
So with the enemy and the stranger
And the friend,
loved
the three,
ones, there's some sort of something going on between me and my boss. And
Okay, so she's just, Krista, try and be precise.
Okay.
You're very spacious.
yeah, I don't want to.
So there's something going on between her and her boss. What do you mean?
I don't.
He's mean to you or you fancy him?
Yeah, she's mean.
Oh, she's mean to you, you're not fancying him.
mean to
Okay,
others.
she's mean to everybody, including Crystal. Then,
Yeah,
question?
so I don't like that.
Of
and
course
I
you
know
don't,
that,
because you want to be loved.
But I have this weird thing that I want her to like me.
Of course,
I-
naturally. Well, it
I
helps if
wanna
she's
be
your
her
boss.
friend,
No, of course.
and it's weird because
Okay.
I don't.
Okay, so then what's the question, sweetheart?
I'm wondering why I'm attracted to that.
Oh, because no,
Yeah.
darling, it's very simple. From the positive side, the virtuous side, it does help to have a boss who appreciates us, doesn't it? So
Yeah.
that is useful. But the real one that drives us is this emotional hunger, and you're desperate to get her to like you. So you're going out of your way to try and get her to like you. Well, honey, if it's mainly coming from attachment, all you'll do is push her away.
Right.
Just
So-
do your job, be content, be relaxed, stop demanding she like you. You really got to be, for your own sake, try to be content, take it as a practice, do your job well. And if it gets too impossible, leave the damn job. We all know ourselves, you look at two dogs together. One of them keeps wanting the other to love them, and the other one becomes a big bully. Then the victim stands up and the other one becomes a victim. It's like you can see them cringing, it's like everywhere. It's a jealousy, it's arrogance, it's low. So it's the same old dramas in all of us. So we've got to be very cautious about that one.
And then continue to have love for her and
Continue to just try and observe her. Notice if she's mean, she's arrogant. Maybe she's got a bit of low self-esteem, which is the flip side of arrogance. And you kind of objectively observe her, try and see her good qualities, but keep distance,
Yeah.
please. Protect yourself. Do you see?
Yeah.
But stop trying to get her to become your friend, because she's also got the power thing, because she's the boss.
Yeah.
That'll be extra difficult.
So it can't be a friend.
No, it's best not to be a friend. Really, it's not. You just keep distant. Watch, learn about her, have compassion, but check on yourself and just keep doing your work. Do you understand, darling?
Yeah.
Yeah, good, Kristen. But it's so hard because it's like you can see it when we're kids, the second you feel that other kid doesn't like you, you're panic stricken. I mean, look at the dramas I hear about now because everything's on social media, isn't it? I don't see all that. It's just the same problem, but it's desperate. I mean, it's like desperate now, It's hung 1,000 times a day. You're just frantic to get a tick or what is it called? A yes or something, a thumbs up or whatever it is. I don't know. I have no idea. Anyway, go on. Yes, sweetheart.
So it's karma that some of us wake up and don't feel worthy. And some of us walk
It's
around
because of attachment. No, mainly
very worthy.
there's two things. Everything is karma, but the particular delusion is attachment. We've got to identify what the problem is mentally. It's called attachment.
But some people don't have it.
Oh, everybody. No, until you hardly realize everybody has it. Just less than others, that's all. Some people do have, we've all got these delusions until we're quite advanced. It's just a question of degree, darling, that's all. And that means, you know, we've got the negative states and we have the positive ones. Then there's a very clear distinction in Buddhist psychology. We don't talk this way in psychology, but it's really helpful to see it. So the degree to which you've got virtue and kindness and love and compassion and patience, that's the degree to which you'll be more content, and the others will have a less of a play. But if the more attachment and anger and jealousy and the less love and compassion, the more miserable you'll be. So we've got one method is to calm the delusions down, but the other method is to grow the virtues and be kind and patient and loving. Like in a relationship, you know, do you understand? This is the job, darling. This is the work. And the virtues are our saving grace. I put it that way. They're the ones. Very often, this is why we don't have this in our ways of thinking in modern psychology. You can have a person who's called, you know, so-called labeled autistic, which means like certain kind of, it's like a super intelligent person. Like I'll tell you a story. One of my friends is a Buddhist, works for Lama Zopa. Her little boy, when he's about 3, you know, the Western view showed all the symptoms of being this super intelligent, crazy, wild kid, right? And the label autistic. She was worried about it. I said, for God's sake, talk to Rinpoche. So she told Rinpoche gave him all these mantras. He's, you know, my sense, even though I'm nobody, I could tell you some special being with special qualities, you know, and with special connection with the Dharma. So then I said, well, send a photo of him and his symptoms, just how he behaved, to the Tibetan doctor, particular one I told her about. And he wrote back and said, yes, that's how yogis behave. Just like that. Do you understand? So, you know, she relaxed. He's now 15. He's kind of super intelligent, kind of a bit weird, but clearly got special qualities, you know. And this is the trouble in our bloody culture. We label these people mentally ill, you know. It's outrageous. So don't worry if you're mentally ill. It's all right, people. We're all mentally ill. It's just a question of degree. And I really say that so sincerely. Buddha would have loved the term mental illness. He calls them afflictions. What kind? Mental. What's a mental affliction? It's a mental illness. Another word for affliction is illness. And this is really not joking, people. Attachment, anger, jealousy, you know, English words, not Greek. They're called mental illnesses. It's so simple. And the Buddha's deal is we're all mentally ill, but we've got the potential to change. That's all. We think it's set in stone, you know. That's our problem. Do you understand, people? I always tell people I'm naked about it. When we were kids in the 60s, 3 of my sisters, there were 7 of us in a row. My poor mum was so busy. And she had 8 in 9 years. And she was 33 when she started. 33. Her first child was when she was 33. And she had 8 after that in 9.5 years. Anyway, whatever. 6 girls and then a boy at the end. Remember, my father ran around the neighborhood celebrating. Anyway, whatever. But all in the 60s, I'd gone to London already, being my hippie or whatever I was. And 3 of my sisters, one after the other, had complete mental collapse. My mum was so busy, I promise, trying to find out how to help her crazy daughters, you know. But this is my point now. They're all fine now, great. But our saving grace, and this is what I'm saying before, we don't think of virtues, you know. You don't think of virtues. When I look at all my sisters, we've all got ethics, compassionate, very intelligent, very kind, very generous. That's what creates our lives. That's what makes us happy. We might be crazy and have busy mind. Listen to me, I'm a maniac, you know. Do you understand? And when I went to my mother, when I came back, I was a radical lesbian separatist feminist at the time. My mother made me go to this psychiatrist, and he diagnosed me as well. He called all of us, the 7 of us, manic depressive. That was the term they used back then. And I remember thinking, well, screw you and your male medicine. I don't care if I'm crazy. I'm going to handle it. And I meant that. I didn't care, you know. But what saves all my sisters, they've got these marvelous good qualities. Now, if you can also have a person who's called manic depressive or mental, whatever the term you want lately, but they don't have much generosity, don't have many good ethics, that's the person who has trouble. Are you hearing my point? You know, I remember one woman in a class, she said, what am I going to do with my 15-year-old daughter? She throws chairs at me. And I said, well, tell me her good qualities. Kind, loving, compassionate, speaks the truth. I said, she'll be fine. I really mean this. But we don't think this way, you know. You can be crazy, but have virtue, and then you're okay. I mean, it's hard work. Are we communicating?
Yes.
So we've got to be very courageous to see our minds, you know, and own what's there. You know, stop blaming your mum and dad. Or mum mostly, isn't it? We don't blame our dads, we blame our mums. Anyway, I'm raving on here. Any questions? We continue, I think, with equanimity. Shall we do that? Yes, darling.
I know we touched on this when you were talking.
Yes, Anne, go on.
You know, fruit, positive and negative karma is going to lead to either pleasant or unpleasant feelings, okay?
Exactly.
And let's just say the unpleasant feeling is anxiety, okay?
No, that's okay. To be precise, Anne, so we can have the proper conversation. Anxiety is a neurotic state of mind, but a unpleasant feeling is simply an unpleasant feeling. They're quite different. So, but never mind. Finish your question, and I'll try and analyze it. Go on.
Well, the reason why I said anxiety
Yeah.
was what it, you know, takes on a new form of life, so to speak.
No, I understand.
And it-
Okay,
and
I understand.
then You tell yourself these different stories.
Yeah.
Which is, neurotic. But I'm wondering what practice or self.
I understand, darling. I hear you. Okay, I hear you. I get you. So, so Anne's question basically is when you have, for example, anxiety or indeed anger or jealousy, whatever the neurotic state of mind is, what's your practice? Well, that's where we have to become super familiar with what's going on in our head, which is often 1,000 thoughts a second. And that takes time. So our big problem, the first part of the answer is this. And I think this is a major point in our culture, because we're now more and more changing, I think, with more and more good therapy and things like that. We tend to, ordinary life, you wake up in your life, you wake up in the morning as a little kid or an adult, and then you mainly pay attention to the outside world. All your attention goes to the outside, doesn't it? The breakfast, the food, the toys, the kids, the red lights, the weather. We're always focused on the outside. We know stuff's going on in here, but we don't pay attention to what's going on in here until it rises to the surface to an emotional level, which is when the body feels it. Are you hearing me, Anne?
Yes.
So in other words, all our thoughts are never stopping, but we never pay attention because they're not loud enough. And so then anxiety is the buildup of frustrated attachment. It's just another variation of aversion. Some people get angry and shout and scream and yell. Some people just get worried and anxious and, twist and turn. It's a variation of aversion, which is thwarted attachment. It's ever so subtle. Every second this is happening. So if we don't deal with it when it's small, in other words, we don't deal with the car when we just feel the wheels are wobbling. You go to the mechanic, you fix it. We wait till the wheels are falling off at 120 miles an hour on the freeway. That's our problem. So then it's a bit late to struggle to deal with it. That's why we all got to take drugs, which is why the drug companies are so happy everyone's going crazy. So what we've got to do, this is why slowly, Anne, learn you've got the anxiety or the anger, whatever is the volatile emotion, and you do your best to argue with it and say to yourself, well, it's okay, it'll pass. You do what you can to navigate it. But the real long-term one is to have a practice every day, to do purification. You've got to have the long-term view, knowing this is a symptom. That's all, it's a symptom. Don't be scared of it. Just tell yourself it's okay. You'll go through it. You do what you can. There's a multitude of approaches. It won't go away immediately. And also because it's old habit, we've got also have to learn to live with it, which is kind of difficult. And so in other words, you've got to interpret it differently. Are we communicating?
Yeah,
And there's a multitude of approaches. It won't go away immediately. It can't. It's too advanced because we've left it till it's too late. So you can hear it. And the important thing to slowly is to try and hear what it's saying. So how would you articulate your moments of anxiety? Well, how would they sound if they spoke out?
You're a loser.
Okay, is that anxiety for you? That's just self-hate.
Well, anxiety.
That's just, I'm hopeless, I'm nothing, I'm nobody.
Okay, it takes on a form of its own and it tells you stories about.
Okay, so
yourself
good.
that
So
are-
these stories you're mainly talking about, they're not, oh, the weather will be bad, not, oh, the red light might be bad, someone might kill me. It's more about yourself, you mean?
Yes.
Well, that's not so much anxiety as just this preoccupation with I'm a bad person. That's what you're talking about. And that's low self-esteem.
Okay.
Now, this is a bit unhappy to hear it. It's the flip side of arrogance. So all the delusions exaggerate. So attachment is this emotional hunger that exaggerates the deliciousness of the cake. Aversion is an emotional thing that exaggerates the ugliness of something. So here, this is aversion to oneself. I'm ugly, I'm nothing, I'm nobody. So it's actually aversion and therefore low self-esteem, which is in a way the flip side of arrogance. So what arrogance is I'm so important. And then when someone's mean to you, you collapse down. It's, like you want someone to love you and they keep being mean to you. Then you're so offended. I'm nothing. I'm nobody. So we flip between these. So there's low self-esteem, which is the flip side of arrogance. There's aversion, which is turned against yourself. And then guilt, which says I'm a bad person, which is coming from being criticized by other people. So there's attachment to reputation, there's pride, there's low self-esteem, and there's aversion. All in the mix. And we call it anxiety. Are we communicating?
Very much so.
So there's thousands of thoughts in there, but we don't catch them until it's a big fat web of emotion. We've got to be articulate with what the hell is going on in our own crazy mind and have the delight in unpacking and unraveling it. But you can't do this until you study the Buddhist model. I'm not talking out of the sky. I'm not coming from Jung or Freud here. This is coming from Buddha. So unless you study it, and it takes time. I mean, when I first learned it, it just sounds so intellectual. But more and more I talk about it, I'm trying to put it into practice myself. It's using the Buddhist model. You understand?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
So keep moving, darling. But the other practice is, given that we're all ridiculous, you hear all the rubbish voices. One of the major practices, give it a break, Anne. It's not true. Don't exaggerate. These are exaggerating. You've got to have the confidence to have your virtuous friend. I think about my roommates. You've got all the virtuous roommates, and you got the negative ones, the crazies, and they run the show, and they're the loudest voices. We know that. And your good qualities are hiding. I always think of hiding under the bed and in the closet. Bring them out, honey, and talk to the crazy. Or you talk, you say, okay, it's all right. So you use your virtuous thought. It's okay. I've got good qualities, Anne. Give yourself a break. Don't believe you're stupid, angry. Don't believe you're hopeless. Don't believe you're nothing. I've got good qualities. I've got potential. You've got to say those words, Anne.
Out loud or
To yourself, as much as you like, scream it in the street if you have to, but don't be too much. I think you're quite wacky. So to yourself, that's the habit. We see our tendency is to buy into whatever arises in our mind, and we let it go uncontrolled. We forget that we can argue with them, darling, and bring the positive roommates out. This is a major part of our practice, and I really mean it, but we never remember to do it. And the tragedy is, we believe the bad ones. We know 27 people can tell you your good qualities, Anne. Part of you is hungry to hear it, but the other part's going, nah. Because you don't believe it yourself. One person says one bad word about you, and guess what? You believe it totally. So it proves what we think of ourselves. Understand, darling?
got it.
Good, sweetheart.
Thank you.
Good.
Can
Yes,
you talk about some of the purification
I will.
processes?
I will, darling.
Thank
I will.
We're all
Ooh, I have to have a hot drink. Just a minute. Okay. Okay, so now. All right. So there's different levels of practice, different components like we're discussing. So one is, it's really helpful to have a formal daily practice because it just gives you a sense that you're doing something. It gives you a sense of structure. It's really helpful, So even just to have the discipline to start the day with a practice. But of course we don't want to. We'd rather wake up and go and have a coffee, Oh, I'll do it later. Before you know it, a month's gone by and I've done nothing because we're so attached to comfort, attached to food, attached to our pets, whatever it might be, So it needs a discipline, and we really will benefit, even if it's 5 minutes. Not that anything miraculous will happen in those 5 minutes, but the fact that you've decided, I'm going to start a little practice. And you have your place where you sit, you set it up, you maybe have a nice so-called altar, you might have an image of the Buddha, and it's kind of, you've got a place where you sleep, your place where you eat, a place where you watch television, and a place where you practice. It really helps the mind to do that. Are we communicating? I can't tell you how important that is. So then you have something you do in the morning and you have something you do at night. Just developing the discipline to do something itself is incredible. And that takes a lot of effort because we are very attached to our comfort. Yeah, am I not true? And we're attached to saying, oh, I'll do it later. You know, very tricky, not true. Later never comes. So this is already helpful, just settling ourselves down for 5 minutes. So of course, if you're a Buddhist and you've taken refuge or taken bodhisattva vows, or even taken highest yoga tantra vows, then you've got a commitment to have this. And so it helps your mind hugely, you know. So that means you'd have a little altar, and you might even make so this is where you, as the more you study the teachings, the more you hear, of course, the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, they have all these different kinds of practices that look to us as like a bunch of religious rituals, like making water bowl offerings, doing a prostration. But these have incredible power, and you can't force yourself to think that. It's up to you to decide when you listen to the teachings and practice. If you have some confidence in some teachers, you know, then you would be happy to do something like that. So, for example, the water bowl offerings, the offerings, is you making offerings to the Buddha. So then you think, what the Buddha want a water bowl for? How ridiculous, you know? But somehow these practices are, you are the beneficiary of that practice. And this is not this is really serious. You know, you can be generous to somebody else and the person gets it, but you are the beneficiary of generosity. You've got to remember it's a good practice for oneself, you know? It's not just some religious thing. It's powerful to even think that, you know, you get up in the morning, and if you've learned the water bowls, if you've learned that, up to you to decide all these things, or you can have a flower there. You're making the effort. Go outside yourself. You've got a Buddha, a statue, or a picture on the altar, and that's really just a representative of what you want to become. It's like a mirror image of what you want to become. You think of it this way. So you have your own. You come in, you get out of bed, you go to wash yourself, you go to your altar. You might just put one flower there. You might put your water bowls there. You might whatever. Even just that alone is a very powerful practice. It opens the mind, opens the heart. You know. And then you can sit down, have your cup of tea or whatever, sit down for 5 minutes, read something, take refuge, do a little prayer, anything you like. It's really kind of a quiet little spot, a time, and you motivate for the day. It could be 1 hour, depending on what you do. It could be 5 minutes. It's up to you. But it's very powerful to start the day in the right direction. Then you make a decision. I'm going to watch my body, speech, and mind like a hawk today. So then your next level of practice is watching your mind like a hawk. Watching your body and your speech and your mind like a hawk. So you control your body. You don't have 4 pieces of cake. You don't vomit out every word you feel. You don't swear at the cars, you know, because you know you're upsetting yourself. You're hurting yourself if you do that. So you have a disciplined body and speech, and then you practice observing your mind. So it's a full-on daily practice throughout the day. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. It's pretty obvious. You're not, in other words, not being mindless. We're mostly just mindless. We just follow attachment, eat when we feel like it, sit down when we feel like it, go to the toilet when we feel like it, talk to somebody when we feel like it. We're just following attachment most of the time. Be conscious, be aware. It's powerful. Every minute counts. Then at the end of the day, time's gone like a dream, you finish with a bit of purification. And it's a very simple practice, psychologically so beneficial. So this is where, you know, first of all, what's driving this practice is this recognition that you are in charge. You want to become in charge of this natural law of karma. Karma is playing itself out, whether you are intentional or not. Like, you don't need to grow plants in the, I mean, especially Florida, like I keep saying. Botany is taking care of that garden, but you can learn the rules of botany and use it to your advantage. Karma is ripening every second, but if we take hold of that, then we learn we want to be controlled with our body, speech, and mind. Why? Because you want to be more happy. You're sick of suffering. You have to have this energy to want to benefit yourself and then also to benefit others. But you're the beneficiary of all of that. So it's an intentional kind of process, you know. So at the end of the day, you want to do a bit of weeding. You're going to clean up your act, you know, because every second of the day you're growing karmic seeds, you know. So then you sit down and there's a very simple way to do it. There's a more advanced way to do it. But the essence of it is these 4 psychological steps, you know. So the first one is the 4 R's. I will send you course notes. I promise you. I'll send you all these things in the PDF. You can get it from Nicole. I'm so sorry, I forgot. So it's a really the simplest approach to it. It's a psychology, and that's the point to remember with Buddhism. It's not we think spiritual, and then we think mind, like they're separate things. From Buddhism, being spiritual means being intentional psychologically. It's the mind that's psychological. It's the mind that's spiritual, not some special part of yourself. So the first R is regret. The second is reliance. The third is the remedy. The fourth is resolve. It's an easy way to remember. regret, reliance, remedy, resolve. It's an easy way to remember. Okay, so the first one, you sit down. Now, everybody, just like Anne's talking, has stuff going on in the mind. Everybody has interchanges with people. You might have been mean to the shopkeeper. Your sister might have shouted at you. Unhappy things might have happened. You might have killed somebody. I mean, look at what happens in daily lives, you know, isn't it? I mean, things happen. We don't expect things happen. You might, I mean, a friend of ours was driving a car one day. Suddenly he killed somebody. He didn't plan to. Things happen. We're shocked. Wow, look at this. You know, karma ripens. So this first step is because, you know, even an ordinary day, even without much interaction with others, because our mind's so busy, like Anne's talking, we're exhausted from all the dramas. I'm hopeless, I'm no good, I'm nothing, I'm nobody, I'm fat, I'm this, I'm that. We never stop. We know that it's exhausting. Not to mention the bad mouthing and the cheating and the killing and the lying and the stealing. So you stop at the end of the day, you sit down, and your first step is regret. So what this means is not guilt. We love guilt. Guilt is schizophrenic. Guilt is, as His Holiness said, one time when someone asked, what's the difference between guilt and this healthy regret? And he said, guilt, you look in the past and you go, well, I did this and I did that and I did this. And then you go, and I'm a bad person, isn't it? But before we get to regret is analyze this guilt. What's that rooted in? That's rooted in attachment to being seen as a good girl. Because as soon as you break the cup, oh, did mummy see me do it? Looking around, who's seen me do it? You know, I'm a bad girl because you've been told that mummy said you shouldn't break cups. So we're full of all these, God said don't do this, mummy said don't do this, grandma says this, the government says this. We're full of all these don'ts and we're terrified of being caught. You hear me? Of being seen to be a naughty girl. That's guilt, which is attachment to reputation. So regret is wholesome. So regret is like the first part's the same, as His Holiness said. I did do this and I did do that and I did do this. But then you conclude and you have to consciously change it to, well, you know what, Robina, what can I do to fix it? Completely different view, but we instantaneously go to guilt. It's so in this kind of, it's like we're caught up in it, you know, it's so ancient. So what that means is this, it's like, you know, the one of food and cigarettes. We understand it when it comes to the body. There you are, you know, you're trying to not smoke cigarettes or not eat sugar because you know you don't want diabetes. It's completely to do with compassion for yourself. You know that eating sugar will cause you to get diabetes or whatever. So then you discover suddenly you ate sugar again. Oh God. So you don't just go, oh, I ate sugar, I'm a bad person. And then you eat sugar again and I'm a bad person. You just ground to a halt and die. You got to use it as a learning experience. Well, I did eat sugar. You don't go, well, it's not my fault, it's the sugar company's fault. You blame everybody else. I did kick the dog. I did shout at my sister. Own it. Already this is powerful. You own it. Everything in ego wants to give the blame to somebody else. We want to get off the hook, you know. Very powerful, this one. I did do it. And then you say to yourself, so I use my abortion as an example. I'm not trying to say abortions every time, but any action you've done to harm another, cheated on your husband, lied, stole, didn't pay your taxes. We're always doing something, you know, that's based on delusions, which is I-based. So you think of that action and you go, well, I did do it. The karmic seed was so strong between me and that little baby. I didn't want to harm anybody. It was due to attachment. I did do it. And then I go, well, you know what, Robina, I regret having done that. And I say to myself, why? Because when I did that, driven by karma, I sowed a negative seed in my mind that if I let it just go there, it'll multiply and get more and more and then ripen in the future as me having suffering and getting killed and so on. And you know what, Robina? I don't want that. That's the energy of regret. It's wholesome, it's self-respectful, and it's ownership. It's accountability. Most of the time we try to get off the hook, we blame other people, we live in denial, we push it away, or we hate ourselves because of it. You know, this is healthy. I regret that. So then you can think of the different things you've done. So first of all, you'd think of the things, what did I do today? Kick the dog, shout at my husband, whatever. Remember a few things of actions of your body and speech today, and then you finish. And I regret that, and you talk to yourself. It's you talking to yourself. I regret having done that. Because you know what, Robina, I don't want this habit. I don't want to grow this habit. I don't want those actions happening to me. I don't want further suffering. I'm sick of suffering. It's a kindness to ourselves. I mean, a friend of mine who even teaches Buddhism, he's been interpreting regret as, I shouldn't have done it. Well, that's what your mum does when you did naughty. You shouldn't have done that. That's just called anger. It's useless. You did it. What's the point of saying shouldn't? I did do it. And I regret this because I don't want the suffering. I don't want the future habits. So this whole approach is really based in this confidence in this concept that you create yourself, you know. So this is the first one. Then you think of whatever you did in this life. And then you think of whatever, even though I don't remember all the things I've done in past lives to harm sentient beings, whatever I regret from the depths of my heart, because I don't want the future suffering. And you've got to be sincere with yourself. This is you talking to you, because purification is you doing it. This is the first step. So then, and then of course you can regret your self-hate and all the rubbish, like Anne's talking, all the rubbish in your mind, the jealousy, the depression. I'm sick of this tortured suffering. You know, I'm sick of this, Robina. You mean it so kindly to yourself. This is such a powerful practice. I mean, there's so many ways you can do it with the Sanskrit and the bells and the whistles and all the drama. If you've got it down inside your own head, fine, but do it really simply as a psychological process, you know. Whatever I've done since the beginning this time, I regret from the depths of my heart because I don't want future suffering. I'm sick of suffering. Then you think, well, whom can I turn to? Where's my doctor? Good analogy. And that in this framework here is exactly the role of the Buddha in one's life, not as your creator, but as your mentor, as your doctor. And it's quite serious. It's quite true. Well, whom can I turn to? So if you're familiar with the Tibetan Buddhist practice that we all do, called the Buddha Vajrasattva, you know, this particular aspect of the Buddha, you visualize above your crown. I mean, a friend of mine who teaches martial arts to kids in Oakland, she does this in the simplest, cutest way. She told me recently, it was like hilarious, you know. She says, visualize this little Buddha called Vajrasattva above your crown. He's cute and he loves you. And you think about how he loves you and he wants you to be happy. I mean, why not think like that? It's marvelous. Said, oh, there's Buddha, you know. She says so sweetly, these kids, it's wonderful. You visualize Buddha above your crown, if you like. And then that's what the first part, there's two parts of the second step called reliance. There's sort of two bits. This is the first bit, relying upon the doctor, if you like, having Buddha above your crown. You visualize white light, very radiant, beautiful. If you're not familiar, just think of this beautiful white light energy, you know, radiant light, embodiment of all the perfect qualities, enlightened being, whatever you want. I mean, just sort of have a feeling of being delighted. You've got a doctor whose methods you are using to purify yourself. Buddha doesn't purify, you do. You're just using Buddha, that's all. So the second part of reliance sounds curious initially, but this is how they talk about it. This is where you now cultivate compassion for those you've harmed. The first step, regret, is like compassion for yourself. This is now you think of those you've harmed. I think of that baby that I aborted. Compassion for that person. The people I've harmed, I have compassion for them. The creatures you might have killed or badmouthed or kicked or whatever. You have compassion for them, which means you want to purify now for their sake. So why reliance is because it's very true. You need suffering people in order to have compassion. If you never met a suffering person, how can you have compassion? So you, in that sense, rely upon, you need. And then as Geshe Sopa says, bodhisattvas need their enemies. They're the best object of all of compassion because they're the ones who harm you. So to have compassion for them is really powerful. Put atomic bomb under all your nonsense, you know. Third step, the remedy. There's 1,000 things you can do here, but this particular meditation we do, you visualize just nectar, light, blissful light coming, filling you completely. And it's just your mind visualizing. And your mind is powerful. Everything your mind does leaves seeds in the mind. We just think, oh, it's only in the mind. It doesn't matter. And we have such a depressing view of the mind. Every thought counts. So having this positive imagination of nectar filling you, and you visualize, they say, you're saying the mantra, if you know the mantra, even if you don't know that. All this is like techniques you're using that have power, visualization, and you visualize this nectar pushing out all the negative imprint. You imagine, you use your creative imagination, you know. And all the negative imprints like disappear into space like filthy liquid. Visualize. So Swami Ishi says the power of purification is the power of your regret, the power of your reliance and compassion, the power of the remedy, and then the fourth one, which is the resolve to change. So then you make some decisions. So if you've taken refuge and got the 5 layperson vows, you'll reiterate, I will never kill, I will never steal, I will never lie. You strengthen that habit. You dig deeper that groove in your mind. You know, every time you do play the piano, you get better at playing piano. Every time you say, I will never kill, you get better at not killing. It's not rocket science. So you reiterate that, you do your best not to do those heavy duty things. And then you don't lie about your old rubbish habits, bad mouthing your sister every day. So maybe you'll give yourself a timeline. I will not open my mouth for 24 hours. This is a very powerful practice because we just think, well, I can't help but shout at my sister. I can't help but bad mouth the politicians. You can. You decide. Even when you're bad mouthing your own house and no one hears you, you're harming yourself. So you can make a decision. You know your old habits, always complaining, always criticizing people. For 24 hours, I will not say one word against anybody. And because you've vowed it, and then you remind yourself in the morning, you will keep it. That's how we change, That's purification. It's logical. Then you go to bed with a happy mind. Okay? And you adjust it to your own way of thinking. It's powerful. But you got to do it. Not just say, oh, yeah, that sounds nice. And have confidence that you're not set in stone. So what's also now an added interesting point, these 4 ways of the 4 steps of purification, each purifies specifically one of the 4 ways that karma ripens. All this is in the course notes that I'm going to give you, okay? So this is what's powerful about regret. Regret, let's say you regret killing, you regret stealing, you regret bad mouthing, whatever, that specifically purifies the kind of karma called experiences similar to the cause, which is the stuff that happens to you. So, Crystal, the mean boss, if she can go home at night, instead of trying to be hungry to get your boss to like you, what you can think is, well, I regret, Crystal, talk to yourself, whatever I did in whatever past life with this particular person where I was mean to them. I regret having done that because you know what, Crystal? Because that's why this is happening now. And then don't be surprised it will shift because you change the karma. So if a person at work doesn't believe you, you go home at night, you do your purification. I regret the lying I must have done in a past life that is now causing this person not to believe me. Don't be surprised tomorrow I'll start believing you. You shift the karma. It's really powerful. Do you understand? So for example, like, because I work with lots of people in prison, ostensibly you go to prison because you kill somebody, let's say, but the result of killing isn't going to prison. Going to prison, being caught for doing something naughty is a very specific karma. Lots of people do negative things but don't get caught, right? So the karma of killing is that you get killed or you die young. That'll be in the future. But the karma of being imprisoned is what I try to help my friends in prison. When you do the 4 opponent powers, you strongly regret. I mean, look at the experience of being imprisoned. All your freedom has gone. You live in these shitty places. You probably live with some wacky people. You're probably seen as the lowest of the low. I think prisoners, are even lower than homeless people, right? So you're in the worst environment. You're in the lousiest group of people on the planet. You're seen as nothing and nobody. So that means it's coming from arrogance. You've imprisoned other people. You've restricted their freedom. You understand? So when you do regret, you regret those actions, then don't be surprised you'll get out of prison sooner because you purify that karma. Are you seeing what I'm saying, people? It's very specific. Regret purifies specifically experiences similar to the cause, which is how you're seen and treated by others. Let me finish, sweetheart. Are you with these people? Very powerful. The second one. What? Oh, my head's gone. You want my head or you don't want my head? No, I do. All right. Good. So, okay, so the second one, reliance, a bit sort of curious, but I think this one, the compassion one especially, they have a saying that the ground you fall on, which hurts you, is the very ground you rely upon to stand up. So compassion for others, the very sentient beings you've harmed, you need them to have compassion for them. So in a sense, so by having compassion for others, this is apparently it purifies environmental karma, the way the physical world impacts upon you. The third one, the actual remedy that purifies the worst result of karma, which is suffering rebirths, suffering rebirths. So the main result, let's say, for example, of killing one result of killing would be that you get killed or die young. By regretting it, that can even change that. The second one, the environmental one, is the physical world harms you, it's polluted. If you have strong compassion, then that will help purify environmental karma of killing, let's say. The third one would be to be born in the lower realms. But if you do this third technique, the one of visualizing the nectar coming, blah, 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 saying the mantra, that purifies the lower realm karma. And the fourth one is obvious, the vow not to do it again, purifies the habit to keep doing it, which is the most important. Are you with me, people? So it's very practical psychologically, but we tend to think of it as religion, but don't think of it like that. Very super powerful stuff, and very powerful for yourself. It's you helping yourself make changes and having confidence that you can change. There's no karma set in stone. Do you understand, people? Okay, Adrian, what's your question, darling?
Thank you.
Yeah, good.
My question is with respect to regretting, so then regret the past karmic event. Let's say for her example.
Crystal, yeah.
So specifically saying, is there a mantra or a prayer that encompasses all the previous past karma that
Yeah, of course. No, okay, no, well, that's it, right, that's okay. If there are 4 ways that karma ripens, you got to purify all those 4. You can, so often there is this practice called Vajrasattva, which I'm talking about, and there's a mantra. People tend to just do the mantra, which is pretty powerful, but you've got to do all 4 steps, and all together that purifies all 4 aspects. So there is a mantra, it's a very powerful mantra that's also done with the visualization. That's the most potent part, but you've got to do the regretting and the compassion and the determination to change as well. You get my point?
So the name of the mantra would be what?
Vajrasattva.
Okay.
I'll say it for you. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva. It's long, or there's a short one. Om Vajrasattva Hum. The short one is Om Vajrasattva Hum. That's easy. The longer one, I'll just give it to you as so you can hear it. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Cheno Pachita Jito Me Bawa Sutoshayo Me Bawa Suboshayo Me Bawa Norakto Me Bawa Sarvasidi Me Prayatsa Sawa Karma Sutsam Me Sitam Shyam Kuru Hum Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Vajramami Mutsa Vajraba Mahasama Sattva Ahum Pe. So what I'll do is we can make a recording, and I'll send the recording of it, and I'll send you the practice itself in these course notes I'm going to send you, so you can all do it yourselves if you want to. Okay? Any question? Yes, Lee.
We can say that all day long, but
You
if we
could.
don't understand it, study it, use wisdom and have intention with it. So I
Okay.
can go home and just say that. and it
No,
comes
okay,
out,
this is an
but-
interesting point, Lee. Let's just talk about this. Always intention is necessary. Always motivation is necessary. The more intention, the more motivation, the more awareness, the more intentional, the more powerful. No doubt about it. Even the word intention, not even motivation, but intention literally is the actual meaning of the word karma, meaning mental. It starts with intention, then everything follows. No, of course, no question. But there are some practices, especially the Lamas say, any practices we do in relation to the enlightened beings who are so powerful, anything related to them gives it extra power. So even a mantra is said, even to an animal, there's no intention for the animal. It can bless their mind, put imprint of the Buddha on their mind. Do you understand? So mantras have power in themselves, because somehow because of their the relationship with enlightened beings and the sound. And sound is so powerful. You see, sound is so powerful. Sound can, even if you're in a coma, you can still hear sound in a way. It can really be a great blessing. It's a way we can help animals who can't have intention. Say mantras in their ears and bless them with the. Do you understand? So it's said to be like that. But of course, the more intention and motivation, even better. You understand? Anybody else? Yes, Crystal.
I just want to say thank you, and I have to leave early because I do.
Good, darling.
work,
Sure.
But I'm really grateful.
Good,
for
sweetheart.
Everyone in this room.
Good.
and For everything that you're doing for us and bringing this.
Good,
light into
sweetheart.
our lives.
Wonderful.
So, thank you.
Good, darling. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Crystal. Goodbye, sweetheart. Happy to see you. Happy to meet you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
too.
darling. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, go.
Speaking of the importance of intention.
Yes.
Let's go back for a second to the Tibetan nuns that were tortured.
Yes.
Let's posit.
What,
that
darling? Let's what?
Let's posit.
Yes.
That the torturers did not have the intent to commit unvirtuous acts. Let's say they were brainwashed into believing that what they were doing was okay, or take the example of a sociopath who does not have the intent
Mhm.
of committing
I understand.
wrongdoing.
I understand.
Does that?
Well,
does
the
that
Buddhist
go in the
analogy,
bad
I
karma
understand.
account?
I understand. The Buddhist analysis is quite different. What's your name again?
Rick.
Rick. The Buddhist analysis is quite different, Rick. The intention in Buddhism doesn't imply some kind of conscious awareness. It's just the habit dug deep in the mind from having done an action before that compulsively causes you to keep intending to do it. Of course, there's intention, but it's completely mindless because the habit is so deep. That's the tragedy. And that's really what animals are. Animals have no ability to change their minds. So the tragedy of an animal birth is due to these habits so strongly, you're born with only those habits and not much access to your virtue. And the karma is even 1,000 times heavier. See, intention, we tend to make it more rational. It's not. It's just the habit, deep in your bones. Do you understand? Yeah, which is tragic, which is all the more reason to have compassion, because we're just driven by our craziness, you know. Yeah. What else, people? Nobody on Zoom, any questions? So, okay. So what, okay. I think I want to talk more about how we create karma as well. Go to more detail, I think is helpful. So there's different ways that karma ripens, like I'm saying. And clearly, there's, you know, if your body and speech are involved as well as your mind, that's a more complete karmic action. So for example, you could think of non-killing, an intentional action of non-killing. So in order for that action to be what they call a complete action, which is what will leave a karmic seed in your main bank vault, which will be a cause for getting a decent human rebirth, quite specifically, there have to be 4 things in place when you do that action. So the first is there's got to be a living being there, like the mouse in your kitchen. Then the second part is your mind involved in it. And there's 2 parts here, and these are quite different. There's a bit, I'm saying the words, but here I'm going to articulate. There's 2 bits here. There's more than 2, but we'll make these 2 the main ones. One is intention, which is bare bones, I will. That's all. It's bare bones, I will. Almost it is neither negative nor positive. It's the second part is the motivation that gives it the flavor. So you could argue with the person, as you said, the sociopath, or that guard who's so, you know, as a result of brainwashing, but also their own tendency, it's so strongly ingrained in their mind. I will torture, let's say, but the thing that makes it negative is the motivation, the wish to harm, the anger. So let's say, you know, you've got that mouse in your kitchen. He has a virtuous action. You have the intention, like, oh, I must not hurt the mouse. But the reason is compassion. The reason is compassion. That's what motivation means, the reason, compassion. But they come together so totally, it's like the one thought. But there's 2 things there. Intention, I will not harm the mouse, and then reason to not, because of motivation. You hear what I'm saying? So there's intention and motivation. So then, in this case, the motivation needs to be a virtuous one, because, you know, compassion. Third, you do the action. You catch the mouse, and then 4, the result, a living mouse, you let it out the door, you know. Thank you, Robina. Bye. Happy mouse. Roughly speaking, that's a complete action of non-killing. Now, it's obvious. You could be in the kitchen, and there's a mouse there, and you don't see the mouse. So the mouse is there. The first one is there, but the second, there's no intention because you don't see the mouse, and there's no motivation. But you put your foot down, but you miss the mouse. But then you didn't realize. 3, the mouse, you did the action of putting your foot down away from the mouse and not harming it. And 4, happy mouse. But using 0 karma because your mind isn't involved. You can be walking down the street and there's a homeless person. First point. First, the object of the action, homeless person. Second, intention to give money. There is no intention to give money. Third, 2B, motivation. There's no motivation. 3, $20 falls out of your pocket. 4, they get the $20 and they're happy. 0 karma for you. It's sort of obvious in a way. Do you see what I'm saying? The mind involved in it. You can even now you can even argue. There's your pet, and the commonest thing in the world now with our pets is we kill them. You know, poor vets spend their time killing people. One, there's your pussycat. 2A is intention. I will kill my pussycat. Okay, we call it funny words, especially Greek ones like euthanasia. Do you understand? 2, your motivation. It is not to harm your pussycat. You adore your pussycat. It's compassion. 3, you do the action. 4, dead pussycat. So it is a complete action, but you could argue, because your motivation was even virtuous, that for you, this is the point now, for you, not too much negative karma, but you got to ask the question, which we never do, what about my pussycat? Where did it end up? Well, you had zero wisdom. I'm sorry. As the Dalai Lama says, compassion is not enough. You need wisdom. As Lama Zopa says, meaning well is not enough. You need wisdom. And what's the wisdom in this case is the clairvoyance, which of course you can get eventually, to see the mind of that pussycat exactly and know exactly the karma that will be manifest for that pussycat. And you can say with certainty that when you kill it, it will definitely get a good human rebirth and meet the Dalai Lama and practice a spiritual path. If you can have that certainty, please kill me now. Are we communicating? We don't have wisdom. So that just means you don't play Russian roulette with your poor pussycat's mind. But we convince ourselves because we meant well that it's okay for the pussy. How terrible. Of course, most people don't think of reincarnation. So, of course, it doesn't matter. I mean, you don't think it matters. But the Buddhist view is every person will continue a rebirth. And the point is, at the time of death, like I said, for a pussycat or you, it's the karma that is there at that moment. All the conditions come together that determine the karma that will be triggered. And because we're not that wise. So then the logic is in the Buddhist one, you do everything you can to help the pussycat and be safe and comfortable and secure and help it manage its pain, you know. Because we're just not certain. It's as simple as that. Pardon?
It's suffering now.
Of course it's suffering. Are you surprised? Excuse me, have you noticed the world is full of suffering? Have you noticed the world is suffering? But excuse me, wait, darling. No, wait a minute. We love this argument, and I'm going to be brutal now. Have you noticed how humans are dying every day? And even now we're giving ourselves permission to kill our bloody grandmother. How far is it going to go? Think about it. We think we have the right because grandma is suffering, and even now the world even gives us permission to do that now. But the simple point is, of course they're suffering. Of course they're suffering. But the only solution to suffering isn't to kill the person. It's not the only solution, but we're so used to thinking it is. I mean, there are a million ways you can help your pussycat without having to kill it, to help alleviate the pain. And the trouble is, and I'm not being rude here, well, I am being rude, but you check out if I'm right or not, because we have so much attachment, and then we spend these thousands of dollars on our pussycats and our doggy woggies, you know, thousands of dollars, then it becomes just too much and we can't afford it. So we think, oh, I'll kill it out of compassion. I'm sorry. Not every time. Not every time. I know I'm being brutal here. I'm just talking human nature. But we have the logic so strongly, if it's suffering, you must kill it. And I know even your vets will get mad at you now if you don't. I understand that. But it's much more nuanced than that. There are so many ways you can help your precious pussycat and dog, or the rat, or the bird, or the moth. Put it in a safe place. Say mantras to it. Give it painkillers. Allow it to let its own karma run out. It's not meant to be because, you know, I mean, you can't guarantee anything, but at least, and as much as anything, you see, it's more even to do with your own karma. And as much as anything, because if it is true that reincarnation is valid, and if it is true you're not certain what karma is being triggered in that pussycat when you kill it, you can't say that you haven't sent it to the frying pan, from the frying pan into the fire. That's the point. That we've got to think about that. We've got to think about karma, that's all. It's not a moralistic issue. If you have wisdom, you can do exactly what you think is best for that cat. That's the big point. I mean, and we don't tend to think of reincarnation for the cat. Do you understand what I'm saying? So there are things to think about, that's all. Think about. And I think often we have a lot of fear. Our own fear dominates our discussions, dominates our decisions sometimes, I think. Because we can't stand to see the pain. A lot of people have a lot of compassion, but also a lot of fear about that suffering. So it's really important for us to look at our own minds and see what drives us. Just think about it. Think about it. Do you understand, Donna?
I do.
Yeah.
I do understand what you're saying, but I still know with my own pets. I mean, they were at a point where I just thought this was the best thing.
And of course that, but I know, but I'm not trying to bully you into the Buddhist view. If you say,
I understand.
if you say the best thing for me, you have to know all the consequences of your action, which means you have to know what rebirth I'm going to get. That's why the Buddhist view, that be one of the consequences. That's up to you to decide that.
I guess I never thought
thought that.
Of course, that's the point, sweetheart. So that's up to us to decide. I'm not trying to push it down your throat. It is definitely true, best for the cat now if it doesn't have a rebirth. Please kill all of us now. We shouldn't, but we have to look at why we have. No, it's really true. But we have to look at why it is we have this visceral resistance to euthanasia and big arguments about it. Because somehow to kill somebody is quite a heavy action. But we tend to sort of so it's an interesting topic to look at, is what I'm saying. It really is, sweetheart. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yes. There we are.
So I would like to, based on this conversation, what is the point of view of the Buddhists regarding abortion?
Abortion, yeah.
Yes.
Why is my weird thing here? What's happened? Yeah, it's over here. There it is. There we go. Okay. It's exactly the same thing. There I was, 23 years old in London, and this person came to my womb, right? As a human being at the time of conception. You heard my story, right? Yeah. So it's a human being. Okay, it's not a viable human being yet, but it's still a human being. It's not a dog or anything. It's not a carrot. It's a human being.
Yeah.
Consciousness went there. You understand? So it's a real human being.
It's a human being, what they-
I'm just trying to be logical, okay? I think if you don't laugh, you cry. That's really... Not a carrot. Okay, listen. So there's a sentient being with whom I have karma from the past.
Robina, as soon as you concept the baby,
What?
the consciousness is there. As soon as you realize that you are pregnant.
In general, that's not as soon as you realize, but in that case, in general, the Buddhist view is when the mother and father come together, that intense coming together driven by sexual attachment, which is what's necessary for all the bits to work, isn't it? If there's no sexual attachment, nothing works. I'm sorry. Got to have all these strong feelings. I'm not going to laugh again. Definitely, you're like a carrot then. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm being stupid now. I'm saying ridiculous. So you got to have all that intense attachment energy. And they even say that's what attracts the being who died, that little being who came to my womb. She died. She was in the intermediate state. And then when me and the boy got together, that was the condition that drove her mind very intensely to come to the egg and the sperm. That's usually the time the consciousness comes. Usually, there can be variation, but usually that's when the consciousness goes at the time. So when it happens in the petri dish, I don't know now. It's a bit confusing. But in this case, it was very clear to me. Like I told you, the second I knew I was, as I said, pregnant, which means a mind came into that egg and sperm. So then, okay, due to the karma, because of the karma between us, I said the next thought I had was, I will have an abortion. There was no doubt in my mind. It was very clear, it was very crystal clear. I was surprised by my thought. I'd never had it before or since. So then I went through the process of having the abortion. So of course, what is that? So there's the intention to kill. I didn't say the words, I will kill this being in I just said I have an abortion. So clearly, look at it. There's a being there. 1, 2, intention, right? I will kill the baby. 3, motivation. Now it wasn't anger. It was attachment to my comfort. I'm not being rude now. It's just natural attachment to my comfort. It can be more complicated for some people. In my case, it was very clear. I didn't want, but also what's interesting, my decision was really driven by the karma between us. Sometimes things happen so powerfully, it's almost like you almost feel like there's no intention, but that's the karma coming together. 2 people who come together and one person kills the other. It's almost like the karma is so strong between you from the past, it just happens. But the intention was still there. I did have intention. A friend of mine, I remember telling me, his German guy, he was about 40. He said he'd never forget as long as he lives. His mother told him one day when he's an older guy that she was having an abortion. When he was there, she decided to have an abortion. She's in the hospital. She's in her gown. She's ready to go in. She stands up. She puts her hand on the door and she changes her mind. He said it blew his mind. It was so moving to hear this, Anyway, I had the abortion. So then what happened is also, I asked the nurses and the doctors all facilitated. So I had many people involved, as we all know, including like the vet. So they're all involved in this killing of this baby. I'm not trying to be mean, just looking at it. So the intention, the object was there, a living being. Intention and motivation were there. 3, I got the action done, and 4, dead result, dead baby, basically. So it's called an action of killing. But obviously, there's 1,000 variations of an action of killing. I could have wanted to torture the baby. I mean, but it clearly wasn't that, It was only 12 weeks old. So probably, 12 weeks old is it's already a fetus looking, it's already a human looking creature, isn't it? So probably it's hard. And it got mangled when they pulled it out, had to have another DNC. So the poor thing suffered. So in that sense, it's just not making anybody feel guilty. It's just looking at it, It's a human being there. I don't know. I mean,
But it's no also the karma of that baby.
What?
It's not, the karma of the baby is involved too. Yes.
but I said all that. You didn't hear me.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, you didn't listen to a word I said. I gave you the story in detail. But you say that to get me off the hook, you see. That's the typical one. Oh, but it's her fault. She must have killed you first. Yes, you're right. She did.
Well, you could die too. And that's it, in that moment,
What, darling?
in the moment of abortion, you could die too.
I beg your pardon.
In the moment of the abortion, you are risking your life too.
No, that's the point. You're just like a little goody good. You want to get me off the hook. It's all irrelevant. It's got nothing to do with anything. It's not relevant what you're saying. It's just trying to look very bare bones at things. There's an example of one action and we do a million every day. You've got to take responsibility. So there's no karma that can't be purified. That's why I like to talk about it, I don't want to be guilty. I don't want to hide it. I did it due to karma. She was much as involved. It was like we're in a tennis match together and we, she's harmed me, I harm her. And so then I want to clean it up. So I purify. I regret it. I have compassion. I won't do it again. Of course, everything. There's no karma you can't purify. There's nothing we should be so guilty about that we can't look at it, Yes, Sylvia.
So my other question is, let's say that, for example, people that are in prison, okay, and you have the people that really transform and regret and do that.
Yeah,
work,
right.
And the other people that don't.
That's exactly
but
right.
They suffer.
That's right.
They go through the process of being in prison.
Yeah.
But they never commit that number 2 again. But they didn't go in that awareness.
I understand
of
that.
going.
That's right.
So, it's these people that they don't commit that later in the future.
So what's the question?
But they go through.
Yeah.
They one really purify or go into the regret and the other no. What happens with that? Because of both went to prison and went through that process. Is that like? I don't know how
Sylvia,
to say
listen
it.
to me. I hear you. But broadly, but
that
listen, Sylvia.
valuable?
I understand,
Sorry.
darling. But listen, Sylvia. That's a good example, but look at every day. Every day people have husbands and children and wives and bosses. Some people learn from their experiences and some people don't. It's as simple as that. So you keep making the same mistakes until you change, until you take responsibility.
Yeah.
That's what I can see with the people I know in prison. Those who wrote, when we first started the prison project, those who wrote to us, they wanted to take responsibility. It's their wake up call.
Yeah.
So they transform their lives. Some people just make the same mistake and keep going in and out until they die. That's just how it's life, nothing special. So that's why if we're brave enough, we can use our suffering experiences of sickness and headaches and misery and mean husbands as part of our practice. We all know we need a kick in the bum because we all just like comfort. And when comfort stops coming, it's a wake-up call. That's the point. That's why it's so moving for me, the people I know in prison who really made the most of their lives. I mean, my friend on death row in Kentucky, Mitchell, this white Southern boy, he was back in the 80s. He was in with some friend, Leaf, his friend Leaf. They were together and dealing with drugs. And then they had a fight and people had guns. It was drugs as guns and the people die. And what do you expect, for God's sake? So they put on death row, And then over in the period, Leaf became a very devoted Catholic, and then Mitch became a Buddhist. I met him in '97. And since then, he's this dude on death row, and he's got a death date coming soon. And he's just this funny, wonderful, happy human being living in his red jumpsuit in this garbage dump of a prison, up at 5 a.m, doing 3 hours of practice, has his breakfast, gives it to his friends, works every day. He's the best friend for all the crazies on death row, and he's going to die with a happy mind. And like he said, I'm ready for that electric jolt, Robina. He's like funny about it, Do you understand? I really admire these people. Yeah, yes, Leaf.
But what about the opposite? When we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to keep someone alive for another year? Because we can't predict what their rebirth
That's
is,
right.
then we need to do everything we can to keep them alive, or do they make that decision? Or is
See, that's the trouble with our medical system, I would suggest. It is really based on the wish to, now we're changing a bit, but it's based on the wish to keep people alive at all cost. As far as I think the impulse in our medical system is death is bad. So we have these, and of course, not being rude, but again, being rude with all our insurance companies and the mega rich amounts of money that are made. Then there's advantages in keeping people alive and giving new hearts and new livers and new bums and God knows what. When we're demented, it's kind of can be really driven by greed, isn't it? Not by pure virtue, wanting to help people. So the very interesting example was, I remember, you know, with the Buddhist view of reincarnation. So Lama Zopa's mum, she's such an example. She was up in the mountains, you know, in this place, Laudo, where Lama Zopa was born, this cave he used to meditate in his past life. And then this place was turned to a monastery after Lama Zopa grew up. And so his mum and his sister ran this place. So there she was, a friend of mine, Mary, used to meditate up there. She said she had probably had cancer of every organ, no teeth. She looked like she would have looked like a complete wreck in the West. And in the West, I remember the same time, I remember this, that one of, she's laughing at me all the time. I can't help it. It's just as well you laugh, darling. You're one of my friends, Jamie, who said he just thinks he's a theatre director. And he thinks I'm the funniest thing since he can't believe it. He's in tears of laughter the whole time. He doesn't mind, timing is impeccable, he says. I don't mean to be funny, it's just my mind, you know. There's a comedian, you guys wouldn't know him, he's called Ronnie Corbett. Anybody know English? The two Ronnies, and they're hilarious. They're both dead now, but the little one, Ronnie Corbett, was short little fellow with a big perky with glasses, you know. The number of people in England when I lived there that said, oh my God, I thought you were Ronnie Corbett. I cannot tell you. I remind them of Ronnie Corbett, this hilarious comedian, you know. Anyway, where were we? Louder, thank you. So his mum. So at the same time, Lama Zopa had this English lady, I can't think of her name, Audrey Cohen. I think her name was Audrey. And she was she used to write to him since a little boy when he first came out of Tibet. So she was this rich lady in London with a husband and 5 kids are all lawyers and doctors. So when she got older, there she was in the best hospital with the nicest clean sheets and new heart and new livers and new organs, all in, but depressed and unhappy, if you like. Maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe it wasn't her, but a general story. Whereas there's Lama Zopa's mum with mantras on her mouth day and night, incredibly compassionate and kind, taking care of everybody. And then when she was so sick with all her different organs and everything, you know, probably cancer, as Mary said, of every organ, blood coming out of here and there, but happy mind. And she goes, man, they put her on a helicopter, they get her down to Kathmandu, they send her to India, they get her to go to the teachings in Bodh Gaya with the Dalai Lama, and she dies with a happy mind. Now, you know, we would think she needs so many new organs, she looks disgusting, there's no teeth. So we're a bit obsessed in our culture with everything looking clean and lovely. And of course, it is to the advantage of insurance companies and doctors to have new organs. I'm sorry being rude, but it just is, you know. So then the end up, we keep them alive with their new bits and pieces, and plus the impulse that somehow death is wrong. So you put all that together with the virtue, it's a bit of a problem, isn't it? Isn't it? I mean, are we communicating here?
Then they die anyway.
Huh?
And then they die anyway.
And we die anyway. That's right. So it doesn't mean you should hasten the death, but allow things to take care, allow karma to take care, and remember the mind, and let them die with a happy mind and peacefully. It doesn't mean you shouldn't keep people alive. We just got to be using more common sense is the point I would suggest, you know. Yes, darling.
So my daughter was driving and she killed my friend's cat.
Yeah.
The cat was old, was 19-year-old.
So what's the question?
So the question is, I did all this practice, we did all these prayers.
Yeah.
But she does not forgive me.
I know this is the commonest one, isn't it? So tragic. I know that. I know.
She stopped talking
I
to
know.
me.
This is guilt. And guilt is I'm a bad person. And why does she think she's a bad person? Because she's allowed herself, her attachment to reputation, be believing that other people think she's a bad person. And the irony of ego is we can't let go of hating ourselves. It's so ironic.
Yeah, but my friend doesn't forgive
I'm
me.
telling you the answer. Did you hear me? Did you not hear
She
me?
doesn't forgive me. I'm my daughter.
Sorry, wait a minute. So who is not forgiving her herself, you mean?
My
No, the
friend,
neighbor.
Wait a minute.
the neighbor, the owner of the cat.
Oh, now I'm confused. Start again. I'll tell you
Yeah,
the wrong
that's right.
answer. Okay.
my
So
daughter
who doesn't
killed
forgive? No, please. Who doesn't forgive whom?
my neighbor, the owner of the cat?
Oh, I
doesn't
see.
forgive Me,
You don't have to do with you. You're not driving.
absolutely. But she's like getting old.
Because you're the mother.
Yes.
Well, darling, she's okay. That's a different story. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Well, you got to, when you're angry, you got to blame somebody, and you're the nearest thing. So that's just because she's ridiculous and angry. What can you say? It just shows how irrational anger is, isn't it? You got to be angry with somebody.
Yeah.
And you'll find anybody. You're a sitting duck. You're right there next door. So it's good practice for you, isn't it?
Absolutely. And
That's
she
right.
filled the entire street with signs. Drive slowly, you can kill cats. So the whole neighborhood.
Right,
you know,
exactly.
The whole entire block, every time we drive to our houses, the whole block have to read the signs.
I understand.
You can kill a cat, you can kill a kid.
I understand
you
that,
can
yeah, I
kill like,
So it's good practice for you. That's it. Very good. Okay, so any questions? People? What time are we finishing today?
4.
4. Okay, go on. So, yes.
Quick
Rick.
question, getting back to abortion. for a
Yes,
second.
good, Rick.
What is the Buddhist view on this? Is the being sentient at the moment of conception?
Yeah. That's when it starts to grow into a person. But see obviously,
According to the Buddhist view, is the being sentient at the moment of conception?
it's when the mind joins the egg and sperm. That's the beginning of the growth of the person. Yeah, exactly that. But you see, everything is, we can see that everything is relative. I mean, you can have a child who's alive and you can torture them and kill them slowly. That's clearly worse than, like, forgetting to feed your baby and it dies by accident. I mean, there's levels and levels and levels of intentions and motivations, and that's why each one you can make general statements about what's good and what's bad, but each person's experience is so different. So we have to look into our own mind, our own intention, our own motivation, and take responsibility, because everyone's is different. Everyone's is different. Do you understand? Yeah.
You said there was there were 3 levels of suffering, but I think you only.
I know the third one. Thank you very much. Yes, the third level. So the first kind of suffering is the obvious one. Okay, so this packaging of the teaching, which is implicit in all this talk I'm giving, this lam rim, as we know, this term they use in Tibetan for gradual path. All the teachings of the first level of practice, which I call the wisdom wing, or no, they call the wisdom wing, which is the very first level of control your body, control your speech, live according to the laws of karma, don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, don't harm, don't cause your future suffering, and purify. That's junior school. Next level is you look at your mind and start getting to the root of the problem and uprooting attachment and all the delusions. That's middle school, if you like. That's like high school. That's the wisdom wing. And if you continue in this practice, that gets you out of samsara. You're finished. You realize emptiness and you're out of here, baby. But then, what was your question again? I'm sorry. I missed
The third.
Thank you. Okay. So then the next level is compassion wing, and then finally the 6 perfections, which we never got into, and then finally in the 6 perfections, the realization of emptiness, which is where everything leads to that. That's where you cut the root of all the suffering. Everything leads to that. So if you want to quit the first kind of suffering, which is the future suffering of like suffering realms of rebirth, and as well as bad things happening to you, even in a human rebirth, the solution to that, go to junior school and abide by the laws of karma and purify. That quits the first kind of suffering. Next kind of suffering, the suffering of change, is you give up attachment. The final level of suffering is the assumption of an inherent me in the first place, which is the grasping mind that believes I'm an inherent me, that then gives rise to attachment, which gives rise to harming others. So that's the third level of suffering, all pervasive suffering, being born in the first place, having a human body, having delusions. So you're kind of compelled to keep acting in samsara. So what quits that suffering is by realizing emptiness, and you get out of all suffering altogether. You understand?
Yeah.
That's called all pervasive suffering. So
How is it suffering?
because you keep being reborn in samsara. You keep being, and then, so you'll go into the higher realms for a while due to virtue, the karma runs out, you go down to the lower realms again, and then your karma runs out, and you go to the upper realms again, and the karma runs out, and you keep going around in circles endlessly until you quit it altogether. So it's called all pervasive suffering. Do you understand?
Sounds awful.
Yeah, that's the biggest one. So the first level is just plain ugly old suffering. The second one looks like it's happiness, but it's still in samsara, and it runs out and you go down to the lower ones again. And the third one is being born in this terrible cycle. So you've got to cut the whole damn thing and realize emptiness and quit samsara altogether.
Okay.
Achieve your nirvana, which is the cessation of suffering and its causes. And then if you're on the Mahayana path, you'll still do that, but you'll continue to choose to be reborn because you want to help others. But now it's out of choice.
So there's no suffering.
What?
So there's no suffering.
No, not possible. When you realize, when you've quit, when you've achieved your own nirvana, there's no suffering. And when you're a bodhisattva, there's even less, there's nothing, there's no suffering, there's just compassion and virtue and goodness. Do you understand? Okay. It's 3:15. Okay. We don't have to go before, but we could. You Zoomers haven't asked me one single question. Come on. Any questions tucked away? Kimberly, how come you haven't asked me a question? Kimberly also has questions.
Oh, Venerable Robina.
Petto, have you got a question for me, Kimberly?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment.
Yes, you've got a comment. Come on, what is it?
A couple weeks ago, you gave me really great advice.
I did. Well done, aren't I? Good. Okay, good.
My aunt's husband was dying and she kept trying to contact me. And you told me to contact her in response, like to respond to her.
Sorry, ex-husband, you said your ex-husband's dying. What do you mean her?
No, sorry, my aunt, my
Oh, your
auntie.
aunt was dying and you didn't like her, right? She's an ugly old auntie, right? Is that right?
No, it was her ugly old husband.
Oh, ugly old husband. Okay, so what did you do?
You suggested that I respond to her many requests to contact me.
Yeah.
And I listened to you and it all worked out.
Oh, well done. What happened?
I think what she wanted was for me to acknowledge that, you know, she was having this struggle in her life and to say I was there, because shortly after, like, he died the next day.
Oh, okay.
And so it was great timing. I mean,
Cool.
not for her, but you know what I mean?
Sure.
And then nothing else happened.
Good.
Like I had created all these stories about what would happen
know
if I
exactly.
responded.
That's right. But you finished it. Well done, girl. Well, I'm
Well,
very
you that was from you. Thank you.
Well, I mean, you did it. I just said do it and you did it. So that's amazing.
Oh, that's because I listen.
Okay, good.
I know better.
Okay, darling. Thank you,
you.
sweetheart.
Thank
Anybody
you.
else got questions on Zoom? Come on. Nobody? Nobody. Okay, don't matter. All right, darlings, what else?
Could you explain what you meant by realized emptiness?
Okay, oh my gosh, okay, let's go to that one. Okay. All right. So the general approach, the Buddhist, one way of framing the whole of Buddha's approach to life is that we suffer and therefore cause suffering because of the ridiculous things in our mind. We've said that so far, right? And the ridiculous things in our mind called ego grasping, the root delusion, which assumes a concrete solid I, which he says is a fantasy, which then gives rise to attachment, which exaggerates the deliciousness of things, and then which is a fantasy, then gets angry when the attachment doesn't get what it wants, which is a fantasy. So we live in la land because of these delusions whose particular function is to distort and exaggerate and embellish. So we're living, in a sense, we're not in touch with reality. It's a very vivid, clear way that Buddha's talking. So you get that so far, right? We can see that attachment, aversion, we kind of exaggerate, we distort, we're not clear how things exist. That's his really main point. So we've got to work on that slowly. So first you control the servants of your mind, junior school, don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, because they all get driven by attachment and aversion. So it's too advanced to even look at your mind yet. So you control the servants of your mind, which is your body and speech. Already fantastic. And you purify. Then you get to the next level, and now you start to look into attachment and aversion and jealousy and pride, and realize that they cause you a lot of pain, but also you start to see how they're projections, they're fantasies, they're not reality. They're that's the key point. You get my point? You start to see the picture is not real. So we know this is true. So like there's Kimberly's example. She had all this aversion to somebody. She went against it. She reached out and everything looked different because she changed her mind. This is already clear from ordinary. We can see this. So this is indicating Buddha's point, finally, that he's saying, well, you know what, guys, that proves that nothing has an inherent nature as good or bad. It's the way we see it that determines whether it's good or bad for us. And if we can really, that's the essence of the meaning of emptiness. Nothing has an intrinsic nature. So, okay, in the teachings, you then get to the compassion wing and you go through get bodhicitta, and then you go to the stages of 6 perfections, and the last one you get single point of concentration, which is this brilliant meditation skill these genius Indians invented 3,000 years ago, which enables you to completely subdue to the grosser level of mind, the conceptual and the sensory, to dig deep into the mind, to go to these subtle levels that we don't even posit as existing in the West. This is why these genius Indians are so incredible. Then Buddha went in that system and went as far as he could go, and then he diverged in his own direction. So that technique is absolutely vital to get to, because the level of work that you've got to do to unpack and unravel these delusions, to get to the subtlest delusion, the root delusion, the primordial misconception of a self, which is really subtle and is the root of the problem. You can't get to that to unpack it and unravel it until you've got a really subtle level of concentration in meditation. So that's your final stage of practice, which you build up all through these stages. And then finally, you know, one day in your meditation, the penny will drop, and you will see at the subtlest level that the I that you have believed is existing from its own side, inherent, real, solid, this, that, has never, doesn't, and could never exist. And that's the moment you realize the absence of that fantasy. That's the so-called realization of emptiness. And then you have to perfect that and perfect your bodhicitta, and then you become a Buddha. That's the general picture. So let's go into details a little bit about emptiness then. Okay. Are we communicating, people? Good. Okay. So, okay. The best way to talk about this emptiness, this is shorthand for how things exist ultimately, is to talk about things in terms of conventional reality, which is how things exist interdependently. So this is called the 2 truths. Okay. So Buddha's saying everything we cognize, everything we see, hear, taste, touch, smell, it's seen through the lenses mostly of our deluded, ridiculous states of mind. We've got the virtues as well, and that causes the problems. So if everything we see is not existing the way we think it exists, we've got to first start to do the discussion. We've got to first establish how something even exists conventionally. So there's a cup. There's an I. Now, this is called an I, okay? Word me, I, self, person, they all are synonyms that refer to one of the types of phenomena that we are. That's a computer. That's a mug. That's a lid. That's glasses. That's a cloth. This is a person. So the Buddha's saying we get them all wrong. We're seeing the persons and cups and toilets and, you know, microphones and computers through the lenses of attachment, aversion, and finally the root delusion, ignorance, ripen. Okay, so attachment over exaggerates the deliciousness of the cake, and it's underpinned by the root delusion automatically, the ignorance that actually, so each of the delusions exaggerates, okay? So attachment exaggerates the deliciousness. The ignorance, known colloquially as ego grasping when you talk about yourself, but the ignorance, this root ignorance, ripen, self-grasping, they call it, you can say that, even if it's an object, that, what does that exaggerate? That exaggerates the very ontological status itself of the delicious cake. So this is like, attachment's one delusion, but it's underpinned by this more subtle one, which is much harder to see, of course. So now let's use the object called I, okay? The object called me. So if we look at the 2 truths, and we have to first establish there is a cup, there is an I. And so how do you do that? You establish, well, that's the name given to this. And I'll say, Mummy, what's that? And she will say, well, that is called a cup. And then I shouldn't just accept it. I'll say, well, Mummy, what is it? But she will give me a definition. And usually a definition has 2 parts. The first part tells you its conventional characteristics. Well, sweetheart, can you see it's that flat bottom clay container? And I can see that's its conventional nature. But I'm not happy yet. I don't know what it is in its kind of energy. What is it, Mummy? It's a very powerful point. What's its function? What's its job? What does it do? What's its meaning? Oh, sweetheart, it holds my tea. Well, don't just believe her. You've got to go get her tea and prove it and pour the tea, and then you will see for yourself it fits the definition. It holds her tea. But still don't believe her, You got to then check in your environment whether there's another definition of the same thing that contradicts that. Once you establish that isn't, then you tick the boxes, you shake hands, and now we all agree that is a cup. Now that's conventional truth. If we could just do that, the world will be a happy place. Look at the world with the fantasies about this and that, and the conspiracy theories these days. Every second day, this one and that one, and he this and she this and they that and it this. We live in nightmarish fantasy nonsense about what's reality. Even conventionally, we're up a garden without a. You can't be up a garden without a paddle, can you? It's a creek. Up a creek without a paddle, whatever it is. You're ridiculous. So even getting things clear conventionally is like a miracle. That's conventional wisdom. That's clarity. Now we've got to look at the subtle level of how things exist, which is the tricky one. So we establish I don't know what the definition of a person is, but never mind. I can't think what a definition is. But I know the definition of a sentient being is a mind possessor. So we're one of those, okay? We're one of those. We're not a cup. We're not a toilet. We're not a computer. We might think we're a toilet sometimes. We're not. So, okay. Then, okay, so now what it's saying is that in our mind, this root delusion, the mother of all the rubbish, the mother of the nonsense, this deepest delusion, deepest affliction, deepest neurotic state of mind, deep in the bones of our being, so deep and subtle we don't even give it a name in our culture. That is the root delusion. It's called ripen, ignorance, unawareness. And it's a particular level of unawareness. So as Holiness says, it's not just, when we say ignorance, it means you don't know something. So it's easy. If I say, what's that? And you say, I don't know. Well, that's straightforward ignorance. And you can fix it quite quickly by me telling you what it is. But our trouble is we're seeing things through lenses of nonsense. So you'll say, well, that's a microscope. And you believe it's a microscope, and you've believed for a long time it's a microscope, and it looks like a microscope now. Well, you're in trouble. So not only do you not know the truth about what it is, you've made up a fantasy. So it's like double trouble ignorance. Are you seeing what I'm saying? You could, I'll say, what's 1 + 1? You say, I don't know. But if you say, oh, it's 3, clearly it's more than just ordinary ignorance of not knowing. You believe in a lie. And that's the level of ignorance we've got, Buddha says. Not only do we not know that things don't have an intrinsic nature, we believe they do. So the job is and we're addicted to our lies. We not only do we believe that the cake has this delicious nature and it's going to make me happy, we believe a lie. So it's like not only not knowing what something is, but we have a fantasy which we put on top. This is the part that makes it so difficult. If we didn't have any views about anything, we could become enlightened in a couple of years, But we've got to rip away the lies from our mind first so we can see the truth. That's how Buddha's saying. So, okay. So Buddha's telling us that this ignorance in our mind has a total belief that there is in here somewhere okay, stop. There are 3 levels of dependent arising, the first of these 2 truths. Things exist first in dependence upon causes. And that's where the law of karma comes in, that the I is not the product of only mummy and daddy did or the outside world, but my past actions. Already that concept of cause and effect, of understanding that I am the product of my causes, already can loosen the grip of ego grasping. The second one, I'm going to talk about it, is that this is another level, more subtle, of dependent arising, that we believe totally, that this ignorance believes totally that in here somewhere there is a definite little piece called I. As my friend Pende says, walking hand in hand with all the other pieces. So we know, so this is called dependence upon parts. The I exists in dependence upon causes. The I exists in dependence upon parts. So this is pretty straightforward. There's a piece called I. This is called Robina, I. And so we know it's made of many parts. And what are those parts? There's lots of parts of the body and lots of parts of the mind. So if you added them all up, there'd be hundreds, and in fact, thousands of bits and pieces, we all know this, that have to come together to produce Robina, or a cup, or a computer for that matter. So everything exists in dependence upon parts. So these different discussions from the Buddha are all arguments, actually, that he is putting to these views that existed before, that say there is an I that's intrinsic, inherent, that's like a soul or a self that has no, that is not caused and has no parts. There's all these different philosophical arguments that Buddha is discussing. So it says this instinctive lie within us believes totally that there is in here a very special piece called I. Now, look at our language. We talk exactly like this. I, we say, has a nose. I did not do that to you. How dare you insult me? The main voice in our head, we can say the main player is definitely I, isn't it? It's the central player, and everything is in reference to I, like we said before. Everything. And it's a very powerful word. So what the Buddha is saying is that we grossly over-exaggerate the status of that I. We grossly over-exaggerate the status, the actual ontological status of that I. We over-exaggerate it. We over-exaggerate it. That's what all the delusions do. And so this one over-exaggerates the very status of the I itself. And literally, one of the major mistakes is we believe that in here, along with my breast and my this and my knee and my atoms and my eyelashes and my love and my hate, there's a very special piece with a capital letter called I, who is the owner of all the bits and pieces, who runs the show, who is the boss. We feel it instinctively. Buddha says a load of rubbish, baby. It's an exaggeration. It's a distortion. It's an embellishment. We believed in it for eons. This is the root mistake. So what we have to do is prove it is not true, which of course sounds hilarious to us. So this is why these meditations, as you get more subtle, more advanced, you're using very sophisticated logic to argue with ego's misconceptions. You can't just make it all go away. You have to prove to yourself there's no such I. That's why I like to use the example of IKEA. Buddha would have liked it. One way he gets us to do the analysis in meditation is that you take the person with all these thousands of parts, and you literally start searching within all the parts, looking for this piece that we believe is there, which sounds ridiculous to us, doesn't it? So this IKEA way is another way. It's the opposite. You know, you see online, there's a nice thing called Robina. You get all excited, you want to buy one. So you go to IKEA and they give you a box with 1 million pieces in it. You're very disappointed, isn't it? But you got to build a damn person now. But this is a good example. You've got to build a Robina, build a me. So you got all the parts. You start, and this is what's interesting. IKEA knows exactly how many bits are needed. They don't give you 5.5 legs and 3 eyes. You know, they give you the exact number of bits for your table, your computer, and you put your thing together. So this is the point. We are gradually constructing the I. Think of this. And you keep waiting to find the piece in a special Ziploc box with gold writing on it called I. Because you really believe, unless there's this piece in the middle called I, who is the boss, who runs the show, it won't be functioning as an I. The Buddha says you don't need one. You do not need a piece called I. The bits do fine functioning as a Robina. So finally, there is a Robina, but merely labeled. It's a name. That's it. It's a name. But you see, this is the thing about when we say cup, in general, okay, in general, I will give you a little statement. In general, I'll make a statement. I have a lid and a cup, okay? So if anybody's got half a brain, you look over here where the sound is coming from, and you will see it's a true statement because you know English. And this is the point now. There's this whole discussion, this argument. They talk about, they call it one and many. If something exists, it's got to be one thing or more than one. So how many is this? So if you listen to that statement, you will quickly see that there are 3 phenomena I just stated, aren't there? I is one, cup is another, and lid is a third. So it's 3 phenomena. Now, if that's a true statement, speaking simply, you have to point out 3 phenomena. Okay, line them up. 3 phenomena, each of which is not the other, each of which is independent of the other, each of which is, in this case, separate from the other, meaning they're independent, meaning lid does not exist. Well, in a sense, a lid is a problem. It does. Glasses, okay? Glasses does not depend upon cup for its existence, does it? So cup can break. Well, glasses won't collapse into 40 pieces. Glasses will be fine to function as glasses. If Robina dies, glasses are fine and cup is fine. You get my point here? So in that simple sense, they're independent of each other. What's happening? Who's ringing all the time? Oh, that's my phone. Okay, I can't do anything. Keep ringing. Okay. Now I'm going to give you another statement, and this is where it gets more tricky. I have a nose and an ear. Now, without any analysis, that's a true statement. You can see it. Look, right. Easy, not a problem. But let's analyze. Because we already believe that you can point out the nose, you can point out the ears, and you can point out the eye. But it's very clear you can't. Look, I have a nose. There's the nose. I have an ear. There's the ear. Excuse me, where's the eye? That isn't the ear, that isn't the nose, that isn't the knee, isn't the caca, and isn't the PP and everything else. But we believe there is. Now, if you're sorry. We have to send her out. She laughs too much. So the thing is, you know, it's like oh, you're making me laugh now and I can't think.
Can't point out the eye.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I know, exactly. I lost the plot completely. Okay. Okay. If there were, but let's look at the argument. If there were a piece in here called I. So if you're a Christian, this is my point. This is where Buddha argues with the Christians and the Muslims and the Hindus. He's not being rude. He's got another view. That's all. Because they do posit a soul, a thing that is different, that is permanent, that isn't caused, and that has not got parts. They call it an Atman in Hindus. They call it a soul or a spirit in Christianity. They call it, I think they call it like something else, the Greeks. We all have this view that there is a special thing called I that has a body and has a mind. Buddha's is more subtle. Says you won't find a piece like that. He said, and that's the philosophical view of there being no intrinsic I that runs the person. In a sense, it's like that, the owner. It's exactly the same as the view of a creator. Buddha says it's an unnecessary embellishment. Very interesting concept. Anyway, if there were an I that's separate from the ear and the nose, in just the same way that when the cup breaks, the glasses are going, phew, I'm glad I'm okay, because they're separate. Well, same here. When the nose hurts and is blocked, the ear's not complaining. It's going, oh, poor nose, I'm so sorry. The ear doesn't suddenly go deaf because the nose can't breathe. They're separate and independent in the simplest sense. They've got different names and they have different functions and they're independent in the simple sense. So if there were a piece called I that is independent and separate from the others, and you say to me, Robina, you're such a creep. No, you say, Robina, I hate your nose. I'll say, how dare you insult me? And you'll say, no, I didn't insult you. I insulted the nose. And if the I is in there, it'll go, oh, phew, I'm glad you didn't insult me. I mean, it sounds hilarious to us. But Buddha says this is the main delusion. It's an over-embellishment. It's an over-exaggeration of the very status of what exists. It's not just playing games. This is the root cause of all suffering. And its main function is fear. When you realize the absence of this, when you finally realize this, it is like that's what they mean by liberation. There's no longer fear. There's no longer attachment. There's no longer delusions. You've finished. I mean, you've got more to go, but you've finished the suffering. You are now radiant, blissful, joyful, and utterly interdependently connected to all beings. There's no longer a separate sense of this neurotic, obsessive self, you know. That's how they talk. Something like that. So way to go with all this. There's a lot of analysis that get done, a lot of meditating. All the other leads to it. It leads to it step by step, you know. Are we communicating? Okay. Any questions? This is a tiny little 5 minutes of taste, okay? Studied this for 7 years in the monasteries. Any questions? Mary Smith. Oh, look at that. Mary's there. How amazing. Hello, Mary. I'm so happy to see you, sweetheart. Cool. Anybody else? Anybody questions on that? So this, I mean, this takes massive time to get into, to even get the language right. You know, it's quite tricky. The whole system, it's a whole way of seeing and talking. So we've got to learn it if we want to, you know. So the point is, it's not as if there's no I. There's just no I in the way we think there is. We exaggerate it. And as Amazon so beautifully puts it, when you realize the emptiness of the intrinsic I, when you have realized there is no solid, concrete I from its own side, it's as if there is no I. But there is, dependent arising, an I. But what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it doesn't exist. So that's the yogi's way of saying it. You know? So we have to put these two truths together. Emptiness, dependent arising. Initially, they seem contradictory. And then when we hear emptiness, we hear nothingness. And we hear dependent arising, we hear somethingness. They're both distortions. So bringing these two truths together is the final middle way, you know, the final actual view of reality. That's how they talk. It's just a summary, okay? Any questions before we go home? Maybe I'll finish early. Enough to finish, I think. Huh? Yes, sweetheart. Yes, Rick.
Thursday night, I think.
Bit louder.
I believe it was Thursday night.
Yeah.
You said, there's, I think I heard, there's no creator, and the collection of all sentient beings is the creator.
Okay, no, I'm using the term loosely, creator. As Dalai Lama said, loosely, you can say that the law of karma is self-creation, meaning each individual person in their process of doing and saying and thinking things produces the person they become, but not collectively, no. There's no creator per se.
So there's no external.
No,
creator.
and the Buddha's reason is because we don't need it, because we create ourselves by our own actions.
Okay, so the question arises.
Yeah.
What created the first sentient being?
There's no such thing as a first sentient being. That's the point. And that's what's interesting, Rick, because the concept of a first cause, it's a big one. For the Christians, it's a massive philosophical view with capital F, capital C. The Buddha would argue with that and say it's not viable. You cannot possibly, if you posit cause and effect, you can't by definition posit a first cause, which implies it doesn't have a cause, which is exactly the teaching in Christianity. But Buddha says it's not viable. It's a mistake. So mind and matter, which are the components of a universe, the universe in all the is beginningless. That's the hilarious point. You can't have a first moment, but we desperately want a first moment. Frantically, we want a first moment. And Buddha says that very question itself is a misconception. It comes from the wrong views in the mind.
Is eternal.
Not like that, no. Cause and past and future, very simple, linear.
That's a tough one.
Yes, I know. But this view would say it's only logical deduction. But the point is, we're not locked into this. The law of karma always applies. And like I said, we can learn it and we can get the hell out of the mess and quit suffering altogether. And then with compassion, come back when we want to help others. Then we're free. But your mind is beginningless and endless. Many of the Buddhist teachings say the mind is endless. And when you've achieved nirvana, you're out of here, you're finished. And that's extreme. That's a nihilistic view, the Buddha's view. This Mahayana view we're describing here. So it's a very different approach, isn't it?
So there's no God.
No creator. Superior being, yeah, Buddha says, but you can become one. So the qualities of being infinitely wise and compassionate and powerful, everybody, that's what a Buddha has, and you can become a Buddha. That's where that would be a shocking sin for a Christian to talk that way. Do you understand? Because you only can be one. That's the boss. Do you understand? Yeah, very interesting. Time to go home, please. I think it's time to go home, unless you have a question. No more questions. It's enough. I mean, all this shouting and yelling and laughing must make me exhausted. You want to go home and have a rest, okay? So we finished, all right. We think, okay, anything useful for this, however many hours we've been together, quite a long time. Especially at this intensity, I'm sorry to say. All these seeds we planted, lots of seeds. May we nourish them without practice so we can develop our marvelous potential so we can be a benefit to so many suffering sentient beings, step by step by step. Jangchug, Semchog, Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panan, Ke Gu Chig, Ke Panyampa, Me Pa Yang, Gong Ne, Gondu, Pabashog. And may this little prayer of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, we haven't got the prayer, we'll do it again tomorrow maybe, but may Lama Zopa Rinpoche come back very quickly and be reborn as soon as possible so he can continue to guide us. The blink of an eye, may he come back quickly. May he come back quickly. We need good examples on the earth. Those of us who've got a connection with him, may he come back quickly and guide us, please. That's it, people. Thank you, darling. See somebody tomorrow, hopefully, all being well. Have a break, have a rest tonight, and come back tomorrow. Thank you, darlings.
Thank you.
Thanks, Venerable Robina.
Thank you very much, Venerable Robina.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you.
Tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, darling. Goodbye. Okay.